Hello guys, welcome to Proxima What Ifs. So in this video, we will see, what if Deku born with Sharingan plus Rinnegan plus Byakugan all three? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. 3 Moons Behind Green Eyes. The scream ricocheted off glass and concrete, and Izuku was already moving before he knew where he was going. The crowd curled back from the crosswalk like a scared wave. A puddle wriggled and lifted. And then the puddle had teeth, and then the teeth wrapped around a man's torso. The smell hit last, oil and sour breath and city heat. Back, a bystander shouted, arm flung out like that could push a monster. Phones came up. A security camera clicked as it pivoted. Izuku cut across the asphalt, shoes sliding once on a dropped boba cup. He didn't wait for pros. He didn't wait for anyone. The thing turned, jiggling, glistening, happy to find a target. A sloshing arm flung toward him and split into ribbons. Izuku planted. The world blinked brighter. Veins of Moshio lit themselves in the corners of his vision. Currents in the villain's sludge pulsed like veins. That was all the permission he needed. He stepped left as a strip of goo whipped past his cheek and slapped a traffic sign. He could have ducked. He didn't. The angle gave him a sightline to the hydrant on the curb and the manhole lip half a stride beyond. Good kid, someone barked. Get back. The ribbons converged again. Izuku pretended not to see them until the last half second, then leaned, shoulder skimmed the attack, and put fingers to steel. A magnetic tug answered his palm like it had been waiting to be asked. The hydrant cap shivered and popped. Water screamed out in a spinning fist, pressure and gravity getting along for once. The sludge villain reared, and the man it had half-eaten hit pavement with a wet gasp. Izuku pushed, not with hands. Space flexed, not dramatically, just enough. The new wake in the flood bent 30 degrees and crashed forward to herd the villain of the crosswalk and toward the open manhole. A second tug. He didn't reach, just called, and the round manhole cover skated up from where a maintenance crew had left it leaning against a fence. It flew in an ugly curve. Eyes. Somebody yelled, like that would help. People saw flashes and called them magic. Izuku didn't name anything. He just moved. The sludge surged to bolt around the water. Izuku touched pavement. A pulse. The concrete between him and the villain slumped like something sighed underneath it, and the returning push slammed sludge into the spray. The manhole swallowed. The cove. Clanged down hard enough to ring streetlights for a second. Silence tilted, like the city didn't know what to do next. Are you? The freed man coughed, trying to sit up. My wallet. Not today, Izuku said, breathless but steady. He hauled the guy to his feet. Head between knees for a second. Don't try to stand yet. Sirens rounded the block. Pros were coming, finally. A blonde in a red cape was perched on a distant rooftop. Assessing and probably waiting for backup, or a camera angle. Not his business. Deku. The voice wasn't friendly. It never was at first. Bakugo barreled out the hole the crowd made for explosions and fearlessness. Scowl. Spiky hair already ready to fight the air. He looked from the manhole to Izuku to the man in the gutter to the dented sign. You pick. A fight with a sludge freak so you could be a dramatic hero. Bakugo said, and somehow he made the word dramatic bite. You trying to copy me? Izuku's pulse was still racing, but his head felt oddly clean. The threads of motion that had laced the scene were fading, the afterimage of choices hung around like chalk on blackboard. He could see the thing trying to climb inside Bakugo's words, Sue. LDC the guy on the sidewalk gripping his phone so hard his hand shook. Command presence wasn't yelling, it was knowing what mattered and saying it once. Guy was getting eaten, Izuku said. I had hands. Weak answer, Bakugo snapped. His palm popped a warning crackle. If you're going to jump in, at least try not to get in my way. You were 2 blocks away, Izuku said. I counted. That got a fractional flinch out of Bakugo like he'd been flicked with a rubber band. He took a step that might have been a lunge if someone didn't shout his name from behind and grab his upper arm. Iida. Blue hair, glasses. The kind of honor that wanted to make rules work. Medical assistance is arriving, Iida said, brisk even when out of breath. Please, Katsuki, De-escalate. Bakugo's hand flared, then tightened into a fist. He looked at the manhole cover and then at Izuku and didn't say the thing he was deciding not to say. He threw a glance up at the rooftop and scowled again. Don't die before the exam, nerd, he said. I want my wins clean. Good plan, Izuku said, and meant it. The prose spilled in. Tape elbows, concrete tattoos, a woman who turned her hair into binding cloth. Bottle blonde with the cape finally dropped to the sidewalk when she had a camera there to meet her. Questions flew. A mic skimmed Izuku's cheek like a dragonfly and then hovered at his shoulder. What did you do to subdue the villain? Was that quirk assisted? Can you state your quirk classification? Did you put bystanders in more danger by engaging? Izuku blinked. Once. He'd spent years thinking about the best answers to those questions. Today he didn't feel like serving them practice lines. He looked past the mic. A kid under a bus bench was crying silently and trying to be brave about it. The man from the gutter was wobbling like a cut tree. I'm going to make sure he doesn't faceplant, Izuku told the cameras, and walked away. A girl reached him first, which was funny. Becca. She seemed to have floated there more than run. Ponytail with a bow, cheeks still pink from the sprint. Sweat glazed her nose and she laughed under her breath like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to do that right now. Hey, she said, reaching for the rescued guy's free arm. You're leaking wallet energy. Let's fix that. Thanks, Izuku said. Her eyes sparkled, not in a poetic way but because she was alive and present and trying. She made the guy smile, which meant his hands stopped shaking. This mattered more than a statement. Uraraka Ochako, she said, in the tone of someone tossing you a water bottle, useful, cheerful. Not sticky. I have band-aids I probably shouldn't use on strangers, but we live dangerously already, huh? Izuku, he said, and yeah, an HPSC sedan nosed against the curb like it belonged to the building itself. Two people stepped out, gray suits, tablets, faces built to be nodded at in elevators. The woman was the kind of composed that made silence sound like a tool. Director. His brain supplied, partly because everything about her posture screamed it and partly because the shorter man held his tablet like a shield near her elbow. Mr. Midoriya, the woman said. Warm like a mug you'd burn your hand on if you trusted it. I'm Reina Sagara, Hero Public Safety Commission. First. Well done keeping casualties at zero. Team effort, Izuku said. Not looking at the cameras but knowing they dipped to catch this. Of course, Sagara said. May we borrow a moment? We prefer to get ahead of narratives when minors are involved in unlicensed engagements. It protects you as much as it protects the public. Uraraka was still braced under the rescued guy's arm. She made herself small, like she could fade out of official sight. Izuku saw the way her mouth pinched at the phrase unlicensed engagements. He catalogued it. Citizen brain hearing. Threats first, help second. I've got to get this man checked for shock, Izuku said. We'll handle transport, Sagara said. Already gesturing. Camera aside while we talk. Cameras never went aside because someone said so. Izuku tilted his head and the words scrolling on the nearest mic's tiny monitor jellied and slid. The operator blinked, confused, as his focus snagged on his own name tag. Izuku didn't push it. He gave people back their attention the moment they were safe. He wasn't a thief. Talks after, he said. Sagara's eyes didn't narrow. They smiled, a fraction. After, she agreed. She held a card pinched between two fingers. He didn't take it, not now. She didn't insist. The card vanished as neatly as it had appeared. The man with the tablet looked annoyed at being reduced to prop. Good. Izuku filed that away too. They ended up at a clinic 2 blocks off the main street. Tea smelled like disinfectant and sweet tea. The nurse with the bored kindness of long shifts ushered the rescued man into a room and told him to breathe with her count. Uraraka waited by the door with the kind of hyperpolite patience that meant she'd bolt if anyone gave her permission. You got hit? She asked finally, looking Izuku up and down. You look, bleachy. I'll sit a second, he allowed. He did. The plastic chair complained. Up close, Uraraka's smile was a little sideways, like even her grin knew how to slip through tight spaces. That thing you did with she gestured vaguely at the world. It looked clean. Not like you got lucky. Lucky I didn't get anyone hurt, he said. Lucky the cover was close. That's, she started, then stopped, laugh huffing out. Okay, sure, hero luck, I like it. He didn't want the attention. He didn't hate it either. He enjoyed the way the whole room had a heartbeat he could hear now that adrenaline was ebbing. Uraraka's heartbeat was steady. The nurse's steps kept a rhythm. He inhaled and let the flood of flickering threads around him settle. You could drown in that, if you wanted. He didn't want. The clinic TV replayed the incident with commentary that made him sound more reckless and more brilliant than either felt. The angle looked wrong. The camera had lost focus right when he'd sealed the manhole. A bloom of static, like heat above asphalt, washed across the screen. That always happened when the three parts of his vision lined up. He still didn't have a good word for it. He didn't want one. Names became cages. His phone buzzed. Mom. Where? Fine. Call soon. He texted back. Good. Clinic. Call you after. He was about to stand when the doorway filled with the same gray suit from earlier. Not Sagara. The tablet man. Commission liaison. The man announced, half to the room. We'd like to prepare a statement while events are fresh. You'd like to steer one, Uraraka said under her breath. Not for him, but Izuku heard it and let it warm him. After. Izuku repeated. I said after. It's not a demand, the liaison said, in the tone that meant he assumed everyone would obey anyway. It's protection. Protection starts by asking if the victim wants a quiet room, Izuku said. He looked past the liaison at the rescued guy, who was sipping water and pretending his hands weren't shaking again now that the adrenaline had bled out. We're good. The liaison took one step in, one step out. He left. Good. Uraraka watched him go and then stretched like her muscles were trying to remember fun. You heading back? Eventually. Izuku said. You waiting for anyone? Probably not, she said, then added, I'm fine walking. Also, I'm not helpless. Wasn't offering because you were, he said. But okay, she snorted, easy again. Okay. The sky outside had slid from white to clear blue in that way that made the city pay attention. The sidewalk was still a rumor mill. They walked 2 blocks in no hurry. Bakugo sat on the low wall in front of the convenience store like a fuse waiting for an excuse. He had a sports drink that matched his eyes. He pretended he wasn't waiting, which fooled exactly no one. His gaze snagged on Izuku's face and dipped, just once, to watch for a flinch. He didn't get one. Round 2, Bakugo said, popping the cap with his knuckle. You gonna tell the kami Seijin you're their new pet or you got enough brain cells left to say no? You think I take orders well? Izuku said, and Bakugo barked a laugh because no, he didn't. Uraraka stood a step back like she'd stepped into a scene and wanted to honor the lines that had been written before she arrived. She didn't leave. She didn't need to. We're doing this at the entrance exam, Bakugo said, as if Izuku had argued. No cameras, no suits, no sludge freaks, just you and me and anybody dumb enough to get between. Noted, Izuku said. He pointed at the drink. Hydrate. Don't tell me what to do, Bakugo said automatically. Then took a long pull because physiology beat pride if you were smart. He had gotten smarter. Izuku recognized that and respected it. They didn't shake hands. They didn't need to. On the walk home, the city softened around the edges. Izuku dropped by the grocery for bento and energy bars, then cut south past the park. Pigeons did their eternal city council meeting under the elm. A toddler squealed like someone had invented laughter. His phone buzzed again. Mom. Answer or I'm calling the governor. He answered before she could escalate. Hey, don't. Hey, me, Inko said. Which was how she said I'm glad you're breathing. I saw the news. Your face was all over the news. Are you hurt? Are we being sued? Should I pack a bag? Are you in jail? I'll bring soup to jail. He grinned, then remembered she couldn't see it and put it in his voice. I'm okay. No jail. No soup emergencies. Don't make jokes at your mother, she said, but her breaths evened. What happened to your eyes did that thing? Izuku. They work, he said. I used them. Does it hurt? Sometimes after, he admitted. Today not bad. Home, she said, and hung the soft order like a sign over the front door. He took the long stairs to their apartment 2 at a time and let himself in. Shoes off. Keys on the little dish with the chip in it from the time he'd missed. The TV who MMED news into the living room like a neighbor's gossip. Inko was there before he got the second shoe off, her hands on his face like she could massage stress out through his cheeks. "Hi," he said, muffled. "Oh, hush," she said, and kissed his forehead. "Sit." He sat. She made tea so quickly he suspected she'd started before she called him. She set a mug in front of him and then another, because hydration was also love. She perched on the edge of the armchair like the cushion might warn them about danger. "Agents came by," she said casually, which meant it wasn't. "Nice clothes. Polite like cats." "Commission," he said. "The woman smiled like she was weighing you for a suit," Inko said, frowning at air. "She left a card in my purse. I didn't give her my purse. I don't know how she did that. I don't like that." He reached for his mother's bag on the coffee table. He didn't dig. He looked, saw the glint where paper shouldn't be, and pinched. The card slid into his hand like he'd given it permission to appear. Black, clean font, Reina Sagara and a number, and a motto, "Guardrails for Greatness." He set the card under the mug. The condensation bloomed out, a damp halo. That made him feel better, for no good reason. He could say it anyway. "They want to help you," Inko said, because she believed the world could be negotiated with if you were kind enough for long enough. "They want control," Izuku said. "Because the world was also a board with pieces, and if you didn't play, you got played." He said it levelly, not cruel. He didn't have to teach his mother who people were. He just had to tell her where he'd stand. "Promise me you'll let me worry out loud first," Inko said. "Then you can be brave at me." "I'm not brave," he said, honest. "You're my son," she said. "Braver than my most dramatic worry." He let that be true and sipped his tea. Heat grounded him more than any breathing exercise. His phone hummed on the table again. Unknown number. He didn't pick up. It hummed twice, then stilled. The TV showed the incident again from another angle, this one from a storefront camera. The moment he'd sealed the manhole flickered, and then something else happened that wasn't cameras and wasn't the city. Everything froze. Not fully. The steam off the tea curled and kept curling, so time wasn't dead. The sound flattened like someone had pressed velvet against the world. The light outside tilted, not like the sun moved, but like an idea had leaned in. Izuku looked up because the sensation asked him to look up. Across the ceiling, not touching anything and not making sense. 3 pale rings slid into each other and became one. He'd seen those rings once, years ago, when he'd used his eyes too hard in a practice alley and the streetlight had broken itself into moons. A figure stood where the doorway wasn't. No steps, no air. It wore geometry like clothes. Its face had nothing human about it except the angle of attention. "Midoriya Izuku," the figure said, except it didn't use sound. The tea trembled in response like a tuning fork. Inko's voice came from the kitchen, normal and human. "Do you want more sugar?" "Please," he said, because he didn't want the room to think the strange thing was allowed to take words that weren't his to give. The not voice considered him. He didn't do anything fancy with his eyes. He didn't reach for power. He didn't even stand. "You moved without permission," the figure said, or the air allowed that idea in its space. "Do you understand the accounting of that?" "I moved a man out of a mouth," Izuku said. "If you're here to invoice me for that, send it to the commission. They like paper." The 3 rings quivered. The thing's head, was that its head, tilted a fraction. It looked down at the black card sweating under the tea. The ring nearest the ceiling rippled like a reflection on a pond after a pebble. The thing didn't smile. It didn't have a mouth. It had attention, and it took it back the way a tide rescinds border claims. The world exhaled. The TV leapt forward 3 frames. Inko stepped back into the living room with sugar and the exact number of crunchy cookies that meant she'd done math on stress and carb ratios. "You looked somewhere else," she said, because she knew him. "Just thinking," he said, and took a cookie. He wasn't going to make her worry about things that weren't going to hit her unless he dragged them in. The phone vibrated again. Text this time. Unknown number. "We appreciate your civic instinct. Let's ensure it's supported. RS." He didn't answer. He put the nay face down and watched the condensation stain a ring around Sagara's name. They ate dinner like hungry people. It wasn't heroic. It was rice and something with sesame that Inko had made faster than seemed possible. After he helped wash dishes, he stood shoulder to shoulder at the sink while steam fogged the window and their elbows bumped like hello, we're here. I don't want to hold you back, Inko said finally, quiet. Washing the same bowl twice. I also don't want to let you go. You don't have to do either, he said. You just have to keep asking for sugar levels. She laughed, threw her nose and swatted him with the dish towel. The towel stuck to his cheek and then dropped. He let the moment be stupid and perfect. Not everything had to be earned. Some things got to be given. Later, in his room, he sat on the edge of the bed and looked at his hands. Knuckles scuffed from catching the guy when he fell. A bruise that would flower like a secret on his forearm where the sludge had tried to grip him and slid off. He flexed his fingers and let the three quiet him down. The red clarity, the pale sweep, the gravity hum. He didn't chase them. He asked them to leave him alone. They did, mostly. He tucked the leftover buzz under the mattress of his attention and told himself he could sleep. His phone buzzed one more time. Not Sagara. UA entrance exams reminder, automated, cheerful. Please bring water bottle, pencil, courage. Not those words, but it felt like that. He typed a note to himself anyway. No commission statements. No labels. Do the exam. Do it clean. Then he added one more. Because he kept forgetting. Ask Uraraka if she wants to study. Bring extra band-aids she'll pretend aren't for her. He slept like a person who had run hard, which meant he sank. He didn't dream of rings or judges. He dreamed of the manhole clang and how the sound had rung through his bones. He woke before his alarm and lay there in the quiet and let his heart slow down. Morning tracked through the blinds into a pattern on his floorboards. He rolled out of bed, did push-ups until his arms shook, and then did 5 more because he could. He ate, because Inko shoved toast at him and because he wanted to make his body a promise it could believe. He packed his bag. On his way out, he picked up the card from under the mug. The black had bled a halo that made the letters blur at the edges. He didn't throw it away. He slipped it into the drawer with the loose screws and the extra batteries and the button he'd found on a train and never found the code for. He didn't plan on using it. He didn't believe in pretending things didn't exist just because he hated the shape of them. The door swung shut behind him. The stairwell smelled like laundry soap and a neighbor's aggressively optimistic cologne. He took the stairs again. The city moved with him. The edges of the day were sharp. He had an exam date. He had a rival who wanted a clean win. He had a girl who laughed after sirens. He had a mother who put sugar in courage on request. At the corner, a vendor selling melon bread yelled, "Fresh!" at everyone who came within hearing distance. Izuku bought one because it was true even if it wasn't. He turned one more corner toward the school he still didn't attend yet and almost ran into a camera. Midoriya. The reporter beamed. Just a quick word. What's your quirk called? He centered. Not like a monk but like a guy who had to decide if he needed to jump on a moving bus. He looked past the mic. There were kids in uniforms trying to get by, and adults who would be late if they got stuck behind this box. A cyclist navigated with that tiny frown of concentration that meant he cared enough not to hit anyone. All of that was more interesting than a label. Labels did one thing very well. They trained people to stop seeing anything else. I don't have one for you, Izuku said. His voice didn't apologize and didn't challenge. I have an exam. I'm late if I keep talking. Just a name. The reporter pressed. It helps people feel safe. People feel safe when they're listened to, Izuku said. You can film the crosswalk this afternoon and count how many times someone sticks a hand out to stop a stranger from stepping into traffic. It's not a quirk. It's a habit. He nodded once. Good luck with your story. He stepped around the camera. The operator blinked and then looked down at his focus ring, frowning like the numbers had moved when he wasn't watching. Izuku didn't twist anything. He didn't have to. Attention followed intention. He kept his own pointed forward. He didn't see the figure that watched him from the reflection of the shop window. If he had, he might have called it an angel or a math problem. He didn't. The reflection tched the way he stepped aside for a woman with a stroller and stored that choice somewhere beyond the city. Judgment wasn't a hammer. It was a ledger. Today, the line stayed open. At the end of the block, his phone buzzed with a new email from UA, registration window for practical exam. He tapped the link. The page loaded. He filled it. He hit submit. The confirmation popped up with ridiculous confetti animation. Because Nedzu had a sense of humor meaner people always underestimated. On the walk back home to grab his training shoes, he saw Bakugo across the street pretending not to stand outside a gym and absolutely standing outside a gym. They didn't wave. They didn't need to. Izuku tapped his temple in a gesture that could mean a dozen things. Bakugo smirked like he'd heard everyone and agreed only with the last two. At the apartment door, Inko shouted, "Did you remember? Water, pencil, courage," he said, and held up his bag so she could see the bulge where the bottle lived. "Smart mouth," she said, fond. "Don't sign anything without me. Wouldn't dream of it." He left again. He took the stairs again. He didn't look for rings in the sky. By noon, the news would move on. By evening, a clip would go semi-viral where a girl with round cheeks and a laugh like a hand on your shoulder told a flustered friend on camera, he was calm. Not cold, calm. The commission would make a note. Sagara would turn her card on her desk and consider which angle of approach worked best on boys who had mothers they listened to. Izuku cut through the alley by the noodle shop, duck Ed under a drying line that had no business being 10 feet off the ground, and jogged the last block to the practice lot where he liked to run drills. No hype, no speeches. He set down his bag and STR, etched until his shoulders stopped pretending they were rocks. He activated nothing on purpose. He ran lines. He practiced footwork. He asked his body for clean pivots and smoother breath and got both in small installments. He imagined a man made of sludge charging and drilled the angle that had put water where he wanted it. He imagined a rival whose hands were grenades and practiced entering without eating a blast. He imagined a girl who floated debris out of the way like she was always tidying and taught himself the timing to match her without stepping on her lane. He stopped when his heartbeat smacked his ribs in complaint. He lay back on the warm concrete and let the sky press its big blue palm against his face. He didn't whisper thank you to anything. He didn't shout I'm coming for you to an exam that wasn't a person. He let his breath even. He let a smile happen. He got up. On the way home, he bought 2 melon breads. One for tomorrow. One for Bakugo he would pretend was extra. Until the right moment to toss it with a, "Don't choke." He pictured Bakugo catching it one-handed and calling him an idiot and taking a bite anyway. The image made him want to run again. He didn't. He saved his legs. In the stairwell, his neighbor's cat did the thing where it blocked the path like a fluffy boss fight. He sidestepped and it allowed passage. That felt like a win. Back in his room, he opened a notebook and wrote 10 lines about angles he'd learned from copying a pro on TV 3 months back. He drew a diagram that no one else would have read, with arrows that meant force and do. TS that meant people and small notes that meant remember to breathe. He snapped the notebook shut before he crowded himself with his own ideas. Space was also training. The card in the junk drawer sat in the dark and did not call to him. He could have looked. He didn't. He shut the drawer properly, because he liked the small sound of wood against wood when things were where they belonged. His phone buzzed with a new text. Not unknown this time. Ochako. Study group. I don't snore in libraries. Promise. He grinned before typing, then cleared the grin from his mouth because typing while grinning felt like cheating. Izuku. Tomorrow after practice. I bring non-heist band-aids. Ochako. I only accept heist band-aids. But okay. See you. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling until memory of 3 pale rings tried to crawl out of his peripheral vision. He didn't chase it. He let the idea of it sit like a cloud behind the building. Weather wasn't an enemy. You just packed right. He washed the blood off his knuckles, which had finally decided to be honest. The sting made his eyes water. He laughed at himself for making a face and then made a worse one on purpose just to prove he could. He looked like a dork. He suspected that wasn't going to go away even if he learned to bend half the city into kinder shapes. He was okay with that. The night put itself together outside and didn't ask him for anything. He sat with that for a while like someone sitting on a stoop with a friend, not talking much, just there. When he finally slept again, he dreamed of a clean white maw. Tea and footsteps approaching and a hand catching his wrist and turning it with care. The hand belonged to nobody and everybody who'd taught him by fighting him. He woke with the shape of the counter in his fingers. In the morning, he would run. In a week, he would sit an exam. In between, he would answer his mother when she yelled questions from the kitchen and pretend to be surprised each time. He would not call the commission. He would not name his eyes. He would not practice speeches for TV. He would show up. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. The commission smiles without blinking. UA smelled like fresh cut wood and ambition. Banners with hand-drawn welcome notes hung at crooked angles that made the place feel like a kid genius had decorated it while juggling 8 other projects. The Fron T gate still had scuff marks from a generation of hopefuls loping through it too fast. A couple of teachers watched from the shadows of the entryway like snakes with tenure. Izuku checked in at the desk, tried not to grin at the absurd confetti animation on the tablet, and slipped into the flow of students. 2 seconds later, he spotted Uraraka balancing a stack of forms like it was a party trick. "You doing a paper heist?" he asked, taking half the stack before gravity could get offended. "Not a heist," she said, grinning. "A polite relocation. Those are the most dangerous ones. Please don't tell the staff that," she said, then glanced around. "Everyone here looks like they were born sprinting." "Great cardio," he said. "Gross," she said, but her laugh took the edge off the vase that were prowling around both of them. In the orientation hall, Nedzu was a small white miracle with an expression that said he either knew 3 punchlines you didn't or planned to invent them before lunch. He thanked them all for existing without turning it into a speech. Aizawa stood to the side in a sleeping bag like a disappointed burrito, eyes half-lidded, an aura that said, "Do not be inspirational near me." "We will not be scouting for personalities," Nedzu said, in a voice that sounded like tea happily boiling. "We will be scouting for choices." The room hummed, a hive sizing itself up. Izuku felt the threadwork of everyone's attention crossing under the words. He didn't yank on it. He let it map itself. A person in the back took notes like they were measuring every syllable for court. Another in the front sat so still it was an argument with gravity. 2 rows over, Bakugo sprawled with his arms crossed like a dare. When Izuku's gaze landed on him, he didn't look away. He tilted his chin. "Ready when you are." Nedzu winked at no one and everyone. "Welcome to UA. Make chaos into care." Choirs of squeaky chairs announced dismissal. Aizawa yawned and somehow made it sound like a threat. "Report to your trial instructors. If you pass out, do it in a designated area." The ruined stage looked like a city that had decided to practice breaking so it could get good at fixing. Concrete ribs, rebar teeth, a fake bank with a real door and a winking exit sign. Speakers crackled. Present Mike's voice boomed about rules and partners in a way that made rules sound like a game show. "Iida Tenya," Iida said, as if catching himself on a handshake position mid-fall. He bowed to Uraraka. "I look forward to fair competition." "Me too," she said brightly, elbowing Izuku just above the hip to keep him from smirking. "Don't let me float you by accident." "Understood," Iida said solemnly, which made her snort. The randomizer rolled partners in flickering blue. Izuku caught a dozen micro-flinches around the stadium as names spooled in pairs. He didn't look. He waited for the board to decide if it was going to make his life obvious. Team A. Midoriya Izuku plus Uraraka Ocha. Co-Villains vs Team B. Bakugo Katsuki plus Iida Tenya Heroes. Objective. Heroes secure weapon, villains defend. The stadium made a sound, not cheers exactly, more like the air grinning with teeth. "Don't choke," Bakugo mouthed across the gap. Izuku tossed him a melon bread without breaking eye contact. Bakugo caught it with reflexes that would get him into any program he wanted, sneered like he hated free carbs. And tore off a bite anyway. 5 minutes prep, Smintos announced. "Don't break the building, or do, but fill out the form after." Inside the bank, the plastic weapon waited on a plinth like it had a social life. Uraraka touched the wall, thoughtful. "They'll try to blitz. You're gonna. Do I magic?" "No magic," he said. "Angles. Worse answer," she said, then smirked. "Fine. Give me a job, too," he said. He pointed to the ceiling grid. Float the central light rig if I call flare. Not high. Barely up. Then drop on my count. It's more noise than harm. Got it. Second, if I shout switch. Lighten my vest and your boots and count to 3. Why 3? Because 2 is rude and 4 is lazy. She blinked and then laughed. Okay, strategist. Let's bait them. Footsteps approached outside. Too even to be Bakugos, too loud to be careless, engine spooling. Iida. Izuku touched the floor with the back of his fingers like he was listening to a heartbeat on a wrist. The building told him where it could flex without throwing a tantrum. He leaned toward Uraraka. I'm going to put a wedge under their timing. Do I say something cool? Say, hi, like you mean it. She grinned, put both palms on the wall, and breathed in. He watched her center like a gymnast about to disrespect a vault in the most beautiful way. He liked her style. The door went off its hinges. Bakugo entered not like a wrecking ball but like a surgeon with a grenade, controlled tools, everything hard-edged and precise. Iida rushed behind him in piston bursts, watching angles, trusting Bakugo to handle chaos. Izuku let his eyes bleed open. Not fully. No need to scare the room, but he pulled the threads of motion into focus. Bakugo's shoulders telegraphed a feint toward the left pillar, his core said right. Iida's right leg twitched, not a misfire, a deliberate overbalance to take any surprise shoulder check. Izuku stepped as if someone pulled his strings 1 inch. He turned his hip to meet Bakugo before the lunge existed. Hand up. Palm felt heat. He didn't repel, not yet. The Sharingan swam in his periphery with red clarity, reading the pop crackle in Bakugo's fingers. Counting frame by frame how the explosion would cavitate. Byakugan mapped the room. Uraraka on the wall to his left, Iida's sightlines forming a grid of do not stand there. Hi, Uraraka said, too cheerfully. And the light rig above them groaned a little. Bakugo's eyes cut up, betraying him for 1 frame. That was enough. Izuku slid inside the feint, shoulder to chest, not hard, just invasive. He tapped the floor with his foot. Rinnegan tug. Gentle, tilted a bit of broken tile like a doorstop. Bakugo's weight found it mid-step, his ankle corrected automatically, eating a quarter second at. ND a third of his next explosion's angle. Iida saw the shift and adjusted beautifully. Izuku liked him for it. Iida went for the clean route. He cut to the right, aimed for the fake stairwell that led to the plinth. Izuku let him pass because stopping him now would train Bakugo on the wrong target. He wanted Bakugo invested in him, not the weapon. Bakugo moved the way a knife thinks. Dirty, he said approvingly, noticing the tile. House rules, Izuku said, and pushed. Not brute force, not a show. A steady pull at the metal beam on the left, barely enough to groan, enough to make noise. Akugo's head angled again by instinct, threat, and Izuku snapped his wrist. A thin, precise genjutsu sting rode the motion, not a trap, just a stutter in the rhythm, the suggestion that Bakugo's next step would feel wrong if he took it now. Bakugo, who hated feeling wrong, turned the wrongness into acceleration, blasting to cancel the sensation. The explosion ate the sting and overcommitted him by a hair. Izuku admired him in the space between heartbeats, then stole that hair. Switch, Izuku called. Uraraka's hand flicked. His vest went feather light, her boots too. They took the corner like. They weren't a pair of humans with friction to answer to. Iida hit the stairwell, pivoted, saw the weapon, and did not lunge like an idiot. He checked for traps so fast it looked like not checking. He reached. Izuku blink swapped. The room didn't flash. The world didn't trumpet. 1 second Iida's hand was inches from the plastic device. The next second Izuku was there, palm already on the plinth. Uraraka sliding low to hook Iida's ankle with a toe that had no weight behind it and all the timing in the world. Iida stumbled without falling. He smiled even as he corrected, because getting out, played cleanly was its own kind of joy when you respected the game. Bakugo didn't smile. He landed hard, used the shock as fuel, and sent a point-blank blast that would have taken the door off a real bank. Izuku didn't shield. He shaped space like a bouncer telling a drunk to go home. The blast ripped sideways, gouging a trench in the far wall and showering them in harmless plaster dust. He kept the repulsion narrow so it didn't throw the debris back into anyone's face. Stop redirecting my explosions, Bakugo snarled. Stop aiming them at my face, Izuku said, conversational. Fair. Iida surged back, leaving contrails of good intentions. Uraraka popped her zero-gravity on the chunk of light rig they'd prepped. It lifted just enough to scream the idea of falling into the room's ears. She dropped it on Izuku's count. Now, and the whole stage flinched at the clatter without actually being crushed by anything. Bakugo's shoulders rose a fraction in that fight between adrenaline and self-control, his gaze split. Just for a breath, Iida took advantage, tried to body Izuku away from the plinth without turning it into a brawl. Izuku planted, then unplanted, letting Iida's momentum carry them in a pivot instead of a clash. He touched Iida's forearm with 2 fingers, found the micro seam in the gauntlet Uraraka had spotted from the balcony +1 to polite heists and pressed. Iida's hand relaxed by reflex. Weapon now out of his path instead of under it. He stumbled left. Izuku guided him to a route where he wouldn't crash into Uraraka. Apologies, Iida said on instinct, already rerouting. Because apologies came naturally to a certain kind of honorable. Don't apologize, adapt, Izuku said, not unkind. Bakugo finally stopped splitting targets. He put every piece of his attention on Izuku and came in high-low at the same time, explosions stepping stoning him through air. Izuku met him with basics, because null gaze hadn't entered his life yet and it felt good to remind himself that his body, not his eyes, was where the fight lived. He parried on the outside line, guided a wrist past his hip, took a heel to the floor to steal Bakugo's next step, then surrendered space like a matador with better PR. Bakugo adapted, feinted, kicked off a pillar, and snarled something that sounded like, "Stop smiling." "I'm not," Izuku said, which was true. He wasn't smiling. He was busy. He was happy. Iida rotated in again, boots roaring. Uraraka met him mid-lane, floating a square of tile just as his foot hit it, so his timing went weird but not dangerous. He corrected WITH grace that would have made a choreographer weep. She said, "Sorry," because she was polite even in war. He said, "No, excellent," because he recognized skill when it mugged him. Bakugo finally, got beneath Izuku's rhythm. He used Izuku's own shoulder frame against him, stutter-stepped to eat the predicted repulsion, and sent a burst that would have rung the weapon like a bell if Izuku had still been there. Izuku wasn't. He blink-swapped with the loose beam he'd been nudging the whole fight. It snapped into place behind Bakugo's knee like a pratfall written in steel. Bakugo's leg buckled. He turned the fall into a roll and came up laughing like a wolf with a bone. "Okay," he said, grinning sharp. "Okay." The buzzer slammed down from the speakers with all the subtlety of a dropped cymbal. Villains secure. Present mic howled. Heroes. Beautiful hustle. Audience. Sign the hazard form. Breath came back to the room in gulps. Dust settled. Iida bowed to Uraraka first, then Izuku. Bakugo didn't bow. He stalked up, chest heaving, and shoved a palm into Izuku's shoulder just hard enough to knock him a half step because affection was going to look like violence until they were 30. "You didn't humiliate me," he said, like it was an accusation. "You didn't need it," Izuku said. "I never need it." "Good," Izuku said. "Then the rematch will be fun." Bakugo's grin tilted. "You're still a nerd," he shouldered by, snagging the melon bread wrapper out of his pocket and flicking it into a trash bag without looking. "And stop messing with the room. It's creepy." "File a complaint," Izuku said. "I will," Bakugo said, which was his way of saying thanks. Up on the observation deck, Aizawa scribbled something on a clipboard without lifting his head. Nedzu clapped, softly in a way that sounded like tiny weather. Across from them, a woman in gray leaned on the rail like a visiting aunt at a science fair. Her badge caught a little sun. Sagara had arrived without fanfare, and the air near her smoothed itself like a polite dog. She waited for the hallway, not the cameras. "Mr. Midoriya," she said when they intersected. "Ms. Uraraka." She nodded to Iida and Bakugo. "Gentlemen." Bakugo scowled with the respect you give a loaded gun. Iida stood straighter like he'd been called to read a pledge. Uraraka smiled a little and didn't look away first. "Great match," Sagara said. "Smart use of the environment. I can't coach you, obviously, but I admire students who think about collateral before highlights." "Highlights get more clicks," Uraraka said, like AC. Almond you'd scribble in the margins of a marketing textbook. Clicks don't stop lawsuits, Sagara said, smiling. I'm happy you're learning that now. Nedzu's footsteps clicked tiny beat polite. Director Sagara, he sang. You found our ruin charming. I found your students competent, Sagara said. And cautious in ways that will save lives. Aizawa's eyes opened just enough to count as an appearance. Which is why we'll keep training them without needing outside policy to certify their reflexes. Of course, Sagara said. We all want the same thing. Safe streets, confident heroes, happy sponsors. Happy citizens, Nedzu corrected, still smiling. Sponsors are a garnish. Expensive garnish, Sagara said, matching his smile with one of her own. And citizens are reassured when the garnish shows up on time. Izuku listened, not like he was eavesdropping, but like the conversation was a fight in a different stance. He could see the threads again. Words that wanted to lead, words that wanted to mislead. Words that had a math to them. He didn't cut in. He didn't have to. Sagara turned to him without breaking rhythm. We're forming a youth advisory group, she said. Student. TS who can help the commission understand training realities. Not supervision. Insight. Stipend, of course. Flexible hours. Generous, Izuku said. Practical, she said. You can say no. I can, he said. She waited like most people broke on the silence after that. He didn't. Uraraka shifted her weight in a companionable way that said I'm here, not I'll decide for you. Bakugo snorted. Iida cleared his throat gently because conversations with adults required periodic throat maintenance. After exams, Izuku said. After the USJ trip. After I know what UA asks of me when I actually belong to it. Reasonable, Sagara said. I'll send details. No obligations. Please don't send details, Izuku said, and watched her smile in a way that admitted to finding that funny. She handed him nothing. She walked away with 2 aides and all her calm. Nedzu watched her go, then wiggled his fingers at Izuku like jazz hands from a cryptid. Beware adults who offer you a seat at the table, he murmured, more amused than alarmist. They sometimes mean, be the table. I can be the fork instead, Izuku said. Sharp, Nedzu said, delighted. Lunch. The cafeteria was chaos with good lighting. Somebody in the back had discovered that he could levitate trays if people stacked them precisely, so the middle of the room looked like a tiny, nervous asteroid belt. Izuku and Uraraka found a corner with a view of 2 exits and a condiment station. Bakugo sat with Kirishima from Class 1B who had wandered over preemptively, declaring everything manly, until he ran out of synonyms. Ida spectated rules violations with wide, offended eyes, then decided to help the tray levitator by building supports out of chopsticks and kindness. You deflected that blast sideways, Uraraka said around a bite of curry. Like, there, and then, nope, it looked good. Thanks, he said, your drop timing was art. I live to timer things, she said. I grew up with coupons. That's terrifying, he said solemnly. She nudged him with a shoulder. Also, you didn't go for the knockout. On Bakugo. That felt deliberate. He doesn't learn from being humiliated, Izuku said. And you do. I learn from getting punched, he said. But not everyone needs my study plan. Good, she said. You're not allowed to be right about everything. It's annoying. I'll try to be wrong more. Thank you, she said graciously. Then, after a second, don't be wrong about safety. Or lunch. Or, okay, be right about 2 things minimum, and the rest you can mess up. He filed that under urgent life advice. Halfway through lunch, the air dipped 1 degree in the way that didn't involve thermostats. He didn't look up. He looked at his tray and watched the condensation bead on his water bottle. Circles formed there, not 3 rings in a sky, just tiny halos that decided together apart like they were arguing. You were seen, said a not voice that wasn't even that. It was an allowance he could feel behind his ears. He set his bottle down and wiped the ring away. Neat trick, he said to no one, softly. Thanks, Uraraka said, mishearing him and assuming he meant her floating tray demonstration across the room. I call it not getting fired by gravity. He smiled. The not voice didn't press. It didn't have to. The ledger had noticed him. It would check in again. He could live with That's so long as it kept folding itself around his life instead of trying to stitch him into it. After lunch, they ran evaluations that were less flashy. An instructor with a scar that made his face look perpetually skeptical ran them through scenario drills. Hostage negotiation with foam batons, misdirection in a smoke-filled hallway, a kid stuck on a balcony with a pet ferret that had very strong opinions about being rescued. Izuku deliberately kept his eyes at half-mast. He took corners on 2 feet. He saved his blink for when a foam grenade arced high toward a view deck where spectators stood. He pulled it into his palm from 5 feet out like he'd dropped a magnet and caught it with a hiss between thumb and first finger. He didn't pose with it. He lobbed it back to the instructor and asked for the next drill. "Show off," the instructor muttered, not affectionately. "Good catch. Good throw," Izuku said, because respect was a boomerang. By the end of the day, sweat had rewritten his shirt. His knuckles had reacquainted themselves with tape. He sat outside on a sun-warmed bench with a water bottle cooling his forehead and tried not to think about how big the sky was when you let it be big. Uraraka sank onto the bench like a champion boxer who had just won dignity back from the universe. "I'd like to officially complain," she said. "Against gravity. You're not allowed to unionize against physics," he said. "They have lawyers. Amazing. I bet they bill by the apple." He laughed, a real one that surprised him. "Study tomorrow." "Yeah," she said. "I don't snore in libraries." Quote, "You said that yesterday." "I'm branding," she said. "Takes repetition. Ask any influencer." "Please don't be an influencer," he said. "Absolutely not," she said, mock horrified. "I like touching grass." On the way home, a commission car idled at the curb like it was considering purring. Sagara wasn't inside. The liaison from the clinic sat in the back. K with a tablet and a polite face he had to practice in mirrors. He rolled down the window. "Mr. Midoriya," he said. "A moment." "No thank you," Izuku said, not stopping. "We only need to confirm why. OU won't discuss internal training procedures with the media." "You mean my own fights?" Izuku said. "Your methodology." "Breathing," Izuku said. The liaison paused, recalibrating. "We appreciate your caution regarding unique techniques." "I appreciate your appreciation," Izuku said. The liaison held his smile like a coat over a spill. "Director Sagara believes a formal relationship WOU. LD ensure you never end up misunderstood." "I'm misunderstood all the time," Izuku said. "That's how new things begin." The window rolled up. The car stayed a car. He kept walking. Home tried to meet him at the door. Inko took one look at his shirt, made a face like she'd found a ferret in the laundry, and pointed him toward the shower. Steam and soap returned him to human. He came back out in a shirt that had seen fewer wars. "You got mail," Inko said, tapping a thick envelope. He opened it. UA letterhead. Formal congratulations that read fast and ended with a hand-drawn doodle in the corner. A tiny mouse with a cape. Nedzu's sense of humor had good penmanship. A note at the bottom in Aizawa's handwriting. "Try not to be impressive. It wastes energy." "I love your teachers," Inko said, peeking over his shoulder. "One of them sounds like he naps professionally." "He does," Izuku said. "He's excellent at it." "You'll be careful," she said. "I'll be competent," he said. "Same thing," she said. And then made him a sandwich that tasted like practical love. Night pressed its face against the window later, curious, not nosy. Izuku stretched on the floor and went through SL forms until the hunger of his muscles changed shape and became focus. He set an alarm. He set a second one for Inko's peace of mind. He put his phone on the nightstand face down and hoped the rings in the sky had a busy schedule elsewhere. He dreamed stupid, the good kind. Kirishima yelling, manly, at a blender. Iida scheduling a group nap with a spreadsheet. Uraraka arguing with a vending Mac. Hein that had eaten her coin until the machine apologized and dropped 2 energy bars. Bakugo was there with a melon bread he pretended he didn't like and an explosion that turned into confetti halfwa. Why through because Nedzu had hacked the universe for a second. He woke at dawn before the alarms had a chance to prove anything. The city hadn't fully decided what mood to have. He brushed his teeth. Like a person planning to talk to other people today. He texted Uraraka a location pin for the library and a bad joke about heist band-aids. He held the commission card over the trash and then put it back in the drawer with the screws. Because he wasn't a dramatic person unless it served an actual purpose. On his way out, he caught his reflection in the dark window over the sink. 3 different lights lived behind his pupils. They didn't fight, they just waited like sharp tools in a neat drawer. "Don't embarrass me," he told them. The reflection did not promise anything. He liked that. He wanted a life that could still surprise him. Outside, the day lit its fuse. He stepped into it without checking if he was fireproof. That wasn't courage, that was trust, placed carefully where it had been earned. In his hands, his feet. The people who would run beside him, and the choices he planned to keep making even when nobody clapped. On the stairs, Mrs. Tanaka from 4B was arguing with her son about breakfast cereal brand ethics. Izuku paused, offered to carry a bag of recycling down, and got a blessing and a lecture about calcium in return. When he hit the street, a bus sighed at the curb. He jogged to make it. The driver saw him in the mirror and waited an extra 2 seconds. The small kindness felt like a win harder than the match. At UA, Aizawa greeted them by standing in a howl. Way like a fire code violation in a scarf. "You'll be doing rescue scenarios next week," he said. "Don't look heroic. Be useful. If you can't be useful, be heavy enough to hold a door open." Bakugo snorted. Iida nodded. Uraraka raised a hand. "Sir, permission to be floaty." Aizawa stared like he couldn't believe he'd chosen this career path. "Fine." They laughed. Even he might have. A molecule. The day unfolded with drills and chalk dust and the clean ache of trying to be better without making a speech about it. Up in a window no one looked at long enough to name, the pale arbiter didn't hover or haunt. It observed the rhythm. Kids running toward a future they would build themselves, institutions trying to shepherd without devouring, a boy with 3 moons in his eyes refusing to trade clarity for a collar. Judgment tallied. It did not fall. Not today. Chapter 2 end. Chapter 3. USJ, Spiral of Choices. Field trip. Don't die, Aizawa said, which was the kind of pep talk only a man in a sleeping bag could deliver. The bus hummed with nerves and trash talk. Hiroshima offered Jelly Ranchers to everyone who made eye contact. Iida attempted to get people to sign a "no screaming indoors" pact. Bakugo threatened to sign it in fire. Uraraka nudged Izuku's knee with her knee like a secret handshake. He answered by tapping his water bottle against hers. Clink. Ritual complete. USJ rose ahead like a theme park that had hired an engineer with a disaster kink. 13 waddled out with the flair of a mascot who could atomize a truck and welcomed them with 2 gestures. "Please stay behind these lines. Please bring your curiosity. Rescue," 13 said, voice gentle behind the helmet. "Most days, that's the whole job." Aizawa looked like he wanted to argue, then decided to save it for a future spreadsheet. The class fanned across the entrance. Monsoons waited in the ceiling. Avalanche terrain slumped on the left. A flood pool gleamed under fake sunlight like it was practicing seduction. Izuku split his attention between Aizawa's posture, 13's hand motions, and the little static hops in the lights overhead that meant USJ's systems were running on a separate grid. He liked knowing which wires belonged to which heartbeat. Uraraka smiled because she smiled through stress and because it made other people breathe. Bakugo rolled his shoulders like the building was a bully and he was considering counseling. The lights dipped. Nobody screamed. A murmur rose and cracked in half when the air in the center of the floor turned into a bruise. Purple fog spiral up around empty space and gave the empty space a body. Hands, literal hands, hung on a man like he'd crawled out of a nightmare and brought it as a coat. "Villains," someone whispered. Kurogiri's voice came out calm and metallic. "We are the League of Villains. We are here to kill All Might." Aizawa didn't say anything. He moved. Scarf. Drop. Snap. He took the first group apart before Shock could finish drawing breath. 13 stepped forward with a slow, careful menace that belonged on warning labels. The warp blossomed again. More villains spilled out. A giant bird thing shook the platform like a dropped safe. Nomu. Izuku's vision burned open on instinct. Red clarity wrote every twitch of every wrist. The world became a circle, the Byakugan's cool sweep pushing out to the edges. The Rinnegan's tug hum sang very softly underfoot, like a baseline he could lean on if he had to. He didn't say, "I've got this." He said something useful. 2 teams. He barked, voice cutting clean. Left group. Railings, then stairs. Then out through the northeast exit. Right group. Line behind 13, don't bunch. Uraraka. On me. She didn't ask why. She pivoted into his pocket like they'd drilled it 1,000 times. They hadn't. It felt like they had. Kurogiri flexed the fog like a fisherman pulling net. Portals bit at the floor. The class lost footing in patches, islands in a sudden sea. Izuku grabbed the nearest kid by the elbow and shoved him back to solid ground. He timed it between warps, like stepping between waves. Bakugo laughed. Short, sharp. Don't run. Then he launched straw. Eyed at the fog like a bad idea in a cool jacket. Bakugo. Wait, Iida started, already moving to back him, because loyalty has a speed. Izuku didn't have a lecture in him. He had geometry. He fed a micro pull into a support beam. A loose chain banged down, loud as a gunshot. Bakugo's reflexes snapped toward the sound for a frame. Izuku used that frame to shoulder check him offline, not enough to stop the rush. Enough to change the angle. Bakugo's blast hit the fog clean and did exactly nothing to the warp body, but it smacked a villain trying to climb onto the platform. Good chaos, wrong target. He adapted on the fly. Snagged another thug midair, and spiked him into the floor with a grin that was more problem set than bloodlust. The Nomu hopped off its perch. The floor did not like it. Aizawa met it like someone telling a drunk friend to sit down, scarf flaring, quirk erasing, arms moving faster than the eye. The Nomu didn't care. It took a hit and handed one back that turned the air into broken glass. Evac. Aizawa snapped, parrying 3 people at once. Get out. That was the assignment. Izuku didn't get to play boss fight while exits existed. He turned the class into motion. Byakugan pulled up a map of bodies and intentions. He called shifts like a point guard. Jiro. Left rail, tap for weak spots. Shoji. Double carry, keep eyes on backfield. Asui. Water route is a trap, stay off it. Siro. Stick lines, make a walkway. He filtered a dozen panic micro choices into one path with 10% less panic. Uraraka pinged debris out of the way without making it theater. She caught a kid by the collar when a warp mouth opened under his heels and released gravity just long enough to ruin the portal's bite. He watched how she did it. He liked that she didn't flourish. Clean utility felt like a gift in rooms this loud. Kurogiri slid nearer with an apology in his posture like the world irritated him by being solid. The fog tried to get under their feet. Izuku stomped. Not a show, a placement. He fed a narrow repulsion straight down into the floor. Dust jumped. The fog lost grip for a blink. The portal edges stuttered like a camera trying to autofocus on smoke. Uraraka took the window and floated 2 kids over the gap with a grunt she didn't broadcast. Midoriya, Kurogiri said, metal smooth, like he'd rehearsed the name. You will be escorted to our master. You will be respected. Izuku didn't dignify that with an answer. He yanked an abandoned steel stanchion into his hand without touching it, threaded it through the warp rim like he was patching a tire, and kicked the base just so. The stanchion wedged, pinning the warp against the floor. The fog bucked. The metal squealed. The portal closed, then reopened a foot away, offended. Rude, Kurogiri observed. Busy, Izuku said. The Nomu blurred across the field with a sound like something large being erased. Aizawa took the hit, rolled, came up bleeding and stubborn. Shigaraki shuffled forward, hands grazing the railing like it owed him money. He didn't look chaotic up close. He looked focused. He looked like a man with an itch that had grown legs and a plan. Izuku parked himself between the class and that look. Not grandstanding. Not martyring. He wasn't the wall. He was the crossroads. You don't have to be tall to be a road sign. Uraraka, he said without looking back, flash 2. Counts at your discretion. She knew what that meant. She gave him a tiny hum that said she'd read the room before committing. Kurogiri spread a hand. Warps budded around them like terrible flowers. Izuku widened his stance and reached. The Rinnegan answered like a deep joint cracking. He tugged the air. Not a vacuum. He tugged a relationship between 2 points and reshaped it. It was not a hole. It was a suggestion. The two nearest warps drifted an inch inward, touching edges, canceling swirl. They hiccuped shut. Oh, the fog said, not with words. You can. No, you won't. Not today. He wouldn't. He could do bigger. He wasn't paying that price with classmates on the board. He was not a spectacle machine. Left lane. Go, he shouted, pointing with his chin. Don't stop at the stairs, you'll bottleneck. They moved. Momentum is faith you prove with feet. Izuku matched pace with the last cluster, pivoted when a villain lunged, and redirected the lunge into a rail with a T.N.Y. pull that felt like cheating and counted as survival. He didn't gloat. He did not enjoy hurting people. He hated when they left him no choice, and he still accepted that choices matter even when they're ugly. A chunk of concrete the size of a scooter fell into their path. Uraraka smacked it with a hand, floated it a foot, and let it drop behind them like she'd just closed a door on a bad salesman. Don't come back, she told the rock, absurd and brave. Flare, Izuku called. She popped the ceiling light rig they'd prepped during orientation because of course she'd scoped the bolts while 13 talked about safety. The rig lifted a whisper. Izuku tugged sideways. It slid on its track and crashed down at an angle that made 4 villains duck and a 5th curse so inventively he earned Izuku's respect. Ochako, Izuku said, breathing, you look like death. You look like a worse death, she said. On 3, he nodded. 3. They crossed a gap with a feather of gravity borrowed and returned. He kept the pole small and clean. They didn't need to fly. They needed to not fall. Nomu and Aizawa tore the background into black swirls and red lines. Aizawa's scarf wrapped, cut, snapped. The Nomu shrugged off physics and manners. Izuku's Byakugan mapped the path that would put him at Nomu's knee without getting him killed. He didn't take it. He kept the class moving. He wasn't a hero because he picked the coolest fight. He was a hero because he got people out. Last group, Shoji said, voice steady. 4 left. He had 2 kids slung like backpacks and 2 more holding his sleeves like lifelines. He had a ferret on his shoulder. USJ improv happened fast. Copy, Izuku said. Zero. Lay tape. Already on it. Kurogiri appeared 3 feet from Shoji's left, hand reaching, fog flexing. Izuku didn't blink swap people. He hated the way it treated them like objects. He blink swapped a loose trash can lid instead, letting it take Shoji's position for half a second like a coin theft trick. Kurogiri's reach hit the lid and warped uselessly. Shoji used the breath to step clear. You're annoying, Kurogiri said, almost complimentary. I get that a lot, Izuku said. Shigaraki drifted toward them like a choice you didn't want to make. Hands clattered as he flexed them. His voice had the strange, thin humor of someone who'd been starving for so long other people's full plates were an insult. You break nice, he said to Izuku. You'll make a great cliff. Hard pass, Izuku said. I wasn't asking. His fingers twitched like a man checking his phone for messages. Nomu. Nomu's head snapped like a dog hearing a whistle. A twig of fear walked up Izuku's spine and sat down. He could not outpunch that. Not while keeping people alive. Maybe not ever. Fine. Don't outpunch. Outplan. He threw his voice like a coach on a noisy court. Bakugo. Right flank. No dives. Hiroshima. Guard rail. Iida. Relay. Evac at northeast. Switch to west if crowded. Asui. Keep the splash kids off the pool. They listened. Not because he was in charge, but because everything he said came with a hinge that made the next action easier. Leadership is making the next step make sense. Nomu charged. Space yelped. Aizawa met it and ate a hit that put him on one knee. Erasure flickered. The class flinched. Izuku fed a narrow repulsion at the Nomu's ankle just as it planted to follow through. It skidded a fraction. The follow-up blow missed Aizawa's skull and tore into the floor instead. Not safe. Safer. Move. Izuku barked. Out. Iida took that baton and became a siren in person form. Out. Out. This way. Quote. Shigaraki's eyes lent him a curious patience. You're good at not killing, he said, voice distant. Do you think that makes you better than the people who don't bother trying? I think it makes me me, Izuku said. And I like me. Shigaraki snorted, then smiled in a way that had nothing to do with humor. You'll hate yourself later, he promised softly. When you learn what makes the world change. Uraraka slid between them, hands up, not surrendering, not attacking, just there. Cool speech, she said. Hate the outfit. He laughed, honestly surprised, a raw sound. For a second, he looked young under the hands. Then he touched the railing and the spot turned gray, rotting out. Nomu, he sang again. The giant moved. Izuku made the smallest black hole of a pull, not a hole. A tilt, a tug bean, and shifted rubble out from over two kids baked flat under a concrete lip. Bakugo dove, grabbed both by the back of their shirts, and hauled them up like sacks of defiance. Don't die, Bakugo snapped. That's my job. Stop claiming jobs you don't want, Izuku said. You shut up. They didn't grin at each other because nobody sensible grins in front of a chainsaw. They grinned anyway, a little. The class stretched thin toward the exit, a living line drawn by will. Jiro kept rhythm by pounding the rail in a pattern that meant hurry without meaning panic. Shoji took rear guard. Siro's tape sang. Asui scolded a boy for stepping on her tongue. Momo inventoried advantages out loud with the intensity of somebody calculating taxes while juggling kittens. Kurogiri tried to fork the path with a fresh warp. Izuku answered by shoving a Polar's shadow just enough that the warp closed around empty space like a mouth finding no food. He could feel the Arbiter's attention turn, like weather glancing in his direction, curious. Not judging. Not yet. 13. Aizawa shouted, voice ragged. Contain. 13 extended a hand, pulled B. Ack at the last second to avoid vacuuming a student, and instead vacuumed the staging ramp clean of villains planning to flank. The Nomu slammed Aizawa into a wall. The wall argued and lost. Aizawa dropped, got up, dropped again. Unfair fight. He made it fairer by existing. Out, Izuku ordered. Everyone who can run, run. Everyone who can carry, carry. Uraraka grabbed the back of his vest and yanked when Kurogiri tried to swallow his ankles. He stumbled backward onto safe floor and didn't complain about the save. Thanks, he said. Ask me for help more. She shot back, cheeks flushed. Later, he said. Now is later, she said. We live in a now economy. He laughed because stress decided to leak out that way. He didn't look over his shoulder when the doors blew open and a column of wind and promise arrived. He felt it. Everyone did. All Might, finally allowed to be himself. The hallway became smaller around his presence. The Nomu's attention changed shape. Shigaraki hunched like a cat noticing a thunderhead. This was not Izuku's fight to finish. His job hadn't changed. He sprinted the last stretch with the tail enders, pivoted at the threshold, and held the door while bodies poured through. He kept count with the Byakugan because numbers calm chaos. He could have jumped back in. He wanted to. He didn't. All Might punched the air in a way that made the building clap. The Nomu took it and didn't fall because the world is rude like that. All Might smiled bigger. He made a choice in his posture to show the kids the load could be carried. Aizawa sagged against a pillar and refused to lie down. Kurogiri lifted a hand toward Izuku, thoughtful, and the fog at his wrists grew thorns. We can still barter, he said, as if that was a kindness. I'm not merchandise, Izuku said. We're done. He grabbed an empty metal bench, the kind that hates backs, and thread through it through two portal mouths that were trying to open in the doorway. It wedged. The warps fluttered and died. Kurogiri tilted like a polite bow. He pulled his fog back. Shigaraki scratched his neck until skin flaked under the ruined hands and then gestured lightly toward Nomu. Fine, Shigaraki said. Kill the symbol. We'll finish the homework later. He didn't get to. All Might stepped into him. The Nomu stepped into All Might. The building held a breath the size of a district. Izuku edged the last student through, shoved the door, and braced. He didn't slam it. He left it open 3 inches because heroes do not lock doors on heroes. Uraraka leaned on the jam next to him, panting, hair stuck to her forehead. You look like death, she said again, fond. Let's not make it a trend, he said. They watched the fight through a slit. All Might launched the Nomu into the sky within. Uppercut that wrote a new line in the ceiling. The platform screamed, the pool sneezed, the avalanche slope sulked. The Nomu came back down meaner and met a second punch that taught it to consider compromise. The kids who'd made it outside lined the rail, eyes huge, not cheering, just absorbing the size of what came next. Iida relayed coordinates to pros on the way, voice a metronome. Zero iced a sprain with improvised cold packs. Jiro hummed low at shell-shocked classmates until their shoulders stopped nibbling their ears. The fight ended when All Might decided it would end. Not because he was a god. Because he was a man who gathered everything he was and used it on purpose. When the Nomu finally cratered and didn't get up, Izuku felt the class release a breath like a parade leaving a street. Shigaraki reached, empty-handed, and found no throat he could afford to risk. Kurogiri wrapped him in fog and retreated like a butler shepherding a tantruming heir. Silence ran a victory lap. It tripped on sirens 10 seconds later. Pro heroes flooded USJ through the breach with the practiced chaos of a good kitchen staff. Aizawa waved off a stretcher twice and then had the decency to consent to the third one. All Might stood breathing like a man who had learned the value of quiet. He didn't look at Izuku. He didn't need to. A nod happened in the air anyway. A thank you, not a medal. On the bus back, the class shook in controlled aftershocks. Hiroshima tried to flex his way into confidence and got 2 inches. Iida gave people water as if hydration were a moral code. Uraraka put her head on the window and stared out like the sky had answers and she was daring it to share. Izuku texted Inko. Fine. Long day. Home soon. She replied with 17 heart emojis and a photo of soup. That was mostly vegetables making a very loud argument for carbs. At the gates, Nedzu stood with a phone to his ear and a smile he wore like armor. Sagara was already there, the gray calming presence of a very expensive fire extinguisher. Cameras clung to the fence like ivy. Mr. Midoriya, Sagara said, classmates milling past like tired ghosts. You kept exits open. You prevented stampede conditions. Impressive. You leaked the location, Bakugo said, stepping between like a bad friend and a great ally. Or your enemies did while you weren't looking. Sagara didn't blink. If this is a hint, Mr. Bakugo, send it through proper channels so it can be investigated. I'll write it on your car with a Sharpie, he said. How's that for a channel? Katsuki, Iida hissed, appalled and supportive. Sagara didn't flinch, didn't bite, didn't wince. She looked at Izuku like he had usable data. We'll want your account. After I shower, he said. And after I know Aizawa's okay. Of course, she said. We're not monsters. He thought of the fog and the hands and the judge in the ceiling who was very interested in the difference between intent and impact. He didn't argue. He nodded. He walked. News that night tried to make sense of the part where a kid with green eyes seemed to edit space in corridors. They called it everything. They used mysterious eye quirk, like a hashtag. Commission talking heads worried about recklessness and glow. Nedzu did a 15-second interview in which he said, students executed a rescue, 11 different ways and never once mentioned flare. Inko took a photo of Izuku eating soup and posted it to a family chat with 3 aunties and 6 cousins and a neighbor who thought the chat was hers. She captioned it, he is eating. Everyone relax. It got more hearts than the news. This felt correct. In the early hours, when sleep had finally stopped arguing and surrendered, the world tipped sideways with a familiar hush. Rings slid across his ceiling again. 3 pale cuts in the dark. The pale arbiter didn't step through so much as unfold attention into the room. You refrained, the not voice said, inventorying, not praising. You could have moved more. I could have broken more, Izuku said quietly, because Inko snored once in the next room and he loved that sound more than he loved his pride. The rings breathed, if geometry can breathe. Ledger clicks, not a gavel. The attention withdrew, not fully gone, just less interested for now. He slept. When dawn poked him, it found a boy who had run until the city's muscles hated him and still wanted to lace his shoes. He dragged himself to the kitchen, ate toast, texted Uraraka a breakfast emoji that was technically a rock with eyes, and got a reply that said, gravity union delayed. Coffee first. He grinned into his mug. Aizawa's text arrived late. Don't get sentimental. Bring your rescue notes. You're doing debrief with me. Izuku typed back. Yes, sir. I'll be useful. All mig. Het's message chimed in half a minute later. Simple. You chose well today. Izuku stared at that for a second longer than he intended. Then he set the phone down and packed his bag. He didn't print hero cards. He didn't practice a speech for TV. He printed copies of the exit routes they'd improvised and circled the bottlenecks in red. He slid them into a folder with grit under his fingernails and bandage wrappers in the bottom of the bin. He put on his shoes. He checked he had the melon bread for Bakugo that he would pretend was extra. On the stairs, Mrs. Tanaka's cat blocked him again, which meant the day would be survivable. He took that omen with a nod and kept going. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Festival lines you can't erase. UA wrapped itself in noise and called it celebration. Drew. Ms. from the support course rattled ribcages. Food stalls steamed like they were practicing weather. Fresh paint on the main arena made the sun look like it had a better job than it did yesterday. A humming crowd pressed close. Sponsors, logos tried to outsmile each other on the banners. Cameras perched on rails like metallic pigeons. The Hero Public Safety Commission had people everywhere, polite, gray. Always exactly where an exit sign wanted to stand. Sagara didn't come with a spotlight. She found Izuku under the shade of a vendor awning that bragged about yakisoba like it had invented noodles. Happy festival, she said. Feels like a pop quiz, Izuku said. Everything is a quiz, she said mildly, then held out a folder he didn't take. Suggested talking points for post-match interviews. Media loves clarity. We were prepared, our training worked, fans were respectful, that kind of thing. I'll say what's true, he said. We're aligned, she said, like it was a fact. And, one more thing. She glanced toward the arena. Endeavor asked for consultation on a specific pairing. Which is yours, she said, smiling like a warning label. Against his son, he thinks guidance might help a young star avoid overexposure. You mean losing the wrong way, Izuku said. I didn't say that, Sagara said. He did. I don't take instructions from fathers I don't have, he said. Or from the ones I do. If they're wrong. I admire conviction, Sagara said, and meant it enough to make him look again. I admire clean fights more. For what it's worth, don't humiliate him. Don't heal him by embarrassing him. He deserves better than that. He met her eyes long enough to say okay without saying it. She nodded like she'd accomplished a small thing and left like a woman wit. H3 more fires to keep from showing up on TV. Uraraka clattered up with 2 paper cups and urgency. Found sports drinks in a flavor that tastes like winning and regret, she said, handing him one. Also, Momo is making spreadsheets with her eyebrows. You should go be a chart. Momo stood with the calm of someone who could build a trebuchet out of a napkin in a bad mood. I observed yesterday's calibration with the obstacle course, she said, voice light but focused. The new route includes a balance grid with hidden pressure sensors. If we cross it first, the grid will tilt and punish the herd. If we cross third, we can ride their tilt. I've drawn a diagram in my head. I like your head, Izuku said. What's my job? Don't break the grid, she said. Read it. Signal me. 2 fingers for left swing, 3 for right. Uraraka. Float where it lies. I'll anchor with a grapnel. We'll pirate this politely. Uraraka grinned. Yes to piracy. Momo's mouth twitched. Very polite. Resent Mike cracked the stadium in half with volume. Welcome to the UA Sports Festival. The obstacle race exploded out of the gate like a herd of well-dressed disasters. Ice walls sprang up, then shaved themselves down as smarter feet found channels. Robots took a nap in the first 5 seconds after a certain explosive blonde told them to consider retirement with a series of concussive arguments. Bakugo didn't look back to see if anyone admired it. He didn't need to. The balance grid sang when Izuku hit it. Not instrument sang. Structure sang. Tiny shifts, little please, the way metal gossips when weight asks questions. Byakugan mapped pressure points in a whisper. The red clarity in his periphery counted hip angles in the pack behind them. He flashed 2 fingers, then 3, and Momo Pai voted like she'd rehearsed a dance with a partner that didn't know they were dancing. Uraraka floated the panel under her like she'd convinced gravity to wait outside. They ran the grid third, exact L. Why the right spot to let other people pay the friction tax first? The crowd roared in surprise, then laughed because watching kids learn physics in public is addictive. At the ravine, ropes hung like invitations. Izuku didn't blink swap the gap. He didn't need to. He read the swinging pattern, grabbed the rope that wanted to be grabbed, and let momentum do most of the work. He landed and cleared space for Uraraka and Momo. Bakugo whipped past on the next lane with a grin like a thrown knife. They matched pace for 6 strides, faster than was healthy for friendship, and then split at the final walk. Because the wall had preferences and Bakugo had a habit of arguing with anything that had preferences. Izuku crossed second, hands bloody, lungs loud. He didn't celebrate. He clapped Momo's shoulder when she hopped down. And Uraraka's hand because she stuck it out for a high five that crackled. Polite piracy, Momo murmured, pleased. Your diagrams are terrifying, Izuku said. Thank you, she said, absolutely meaning it. The cavalry battle turned the stadium into a math problem with yelling. Heads whipped to watch teams form like weather systems. Bakugo counted exactly 2 seconds before taking charge of his zone. Todoroki didn't count. The zone counted for him and fell into orbit. Midoriya found his people by the way they stood. Momo, you're with me, he said. I need your brain and a grapnel. Uraraka, float us in spikes, not on cruise control. Tokiyami, if you're willing, I'd like your shadow on our blind side. Tokiyami bowed fractionally. Dark Shadow prefers the sun today, he said, deadpan. We consent. Great, Izuku said. Objective isn't stealing headbands at random. It's dismantling opportunities. They didn't hunt. They created losing conditions for other teams with surgical cruelty and zero malice. Momo fired grapnels to collapse lanes at perfect moments. Uraraka lightened their boots for half-steps of impossible dodging. Dark Shadow hissed warning's eye. Tokiyami's ear and occasionally stole a wind gust to mess with an angle. Izuku saved his blink for when a team tried a pile-on and he swapped places with a tumbling banner instead of a person, Letty. 3 overeager challengers crash into Fabric Theater. Todoroki's team moved like a glacier. Silent, unstoppable, ruining the day for people who underestimated temperature. He speared air with DS of ice and created routes only he could use. Izuku respected the approach and folded it into their dance. He baited Todoroki into overbuilding a bridge, then had Uraraka float one crucial brick so the whole structure sighed and slumped without breaking, forcing a reroute that cost time, not safety. Their headbands stacked. Their hearts climbed. Present Mike yelled until his throat begged for mercy and didn't get it. When the horn blew, Midoriya's team stood in the top brackets. Bakugo glared at the scoreboard like it had lied to him purely out of spite. Todoroki looked at his hands as if he begrudgingly borrowed them from someone stubborn. Between events, Endeavor cornered Todoroki in a hallway shadow and tried to call it mentoring. He loomed. Heat rolled off him. The floor didn't exactly sweat, but it thought about it. Use what you have, Endeavor said. Do not play to weaknesses. You are your fire. Todoroki's jaw flexed. He didn't look up. I am Shoto. Your mother's mistake does not define. Izuku stepped into the space between without a speech in his pocket. He stood there like a traffic cone that didn't apologize. Walk, he said to Todoroki. We have a schedule. Endeavor's eyes lit in the way cameras like. Izuku didn't flinch, didn't dramatize. He held eye contact for exactly the length of one breath and then matched Todoroki's stride without looking back. You didn't need to do that. Todoroki said, flat. I know, Izuku said. Want to talk about anything besides your father? No. Cool, Izuku said. Want to talk about ramen? Todoroki's mouth tilted a millimeter. Vegetables are fine. Not what I asked, Izuku said. They didn't solve anything in that walk, thank God. They didn't try. Todoroki kept his spine, Izuku kept the space, and he hallway stopped feeling like a cage pretending to be advice. Duels cut the day into clean pieces. Early rounds blurred. A speedster who telegraphed too much, a brawler who confused loud with effective. A mimic who learned the wrong lesson and found himself falling for feints that were actually exits. Izuku fought like he trained. No flourish, no borrowed swagger, just efficient choices that respected the arena. He didn't throw anyone out of bounds so hard they hit promotion deals. He put them down and helped them up if they wanted hands. Momo met him by the rail after her own win, cheeks flushed. Hair escaping in stubborn curls. Your footwork, she said, thoughtful. I saw the shift in tempo before you made it. You teach in the middle of a punch. I like when people learn, he said. She smiled. Not flirty, just warm. You should run a clinic after this. Half the class would sign up. Uraraka slid in with 2 water bottles and raised an eyebrow at the shared mood. We scheduling office hours already. Drafting a syllabus, Momo said, amused. Cool, Uraraka said, poking a straw into Izuku's bottle and shoving it at his mouth. Hydrate, Professor. He drank. She watched the arena, not him, pointedly casual. He let that be what it was and didn't make a big thing out of it. People were allowed to like more than one good thing at a time. Semifinals pinned him against Todoroki. The stadium stilled itself with that greedy hush crowds have before an answer. A lot of people wanted Todoroki to be a weapon. Some wanted Izuku to be an argument. Neither plan interested him. They took their marks. Aizawa's voice flicked out from the speakers, bored enough to be encouragement. Begin. Ice arrived like a statement. Izuku met it with patience. He stepped, not back, but side. Toes slicing tiny arcs that turned whole slabs into near misses. Sharingan painted prediction lines across the gleam, subtle red threads trailing from Todoroki's shoulder, his hip, his focus. Byakugan widened the room until the crowd's reflections became a second arena. In those reflections, movements played a half beat ahead, tiny ghosts of what would happen if nobody lied. He didn't genjutsu Todoroki. He didn't pull his feet without permission. He let Todoroki throw his best clean, then answered clean. Why aren't you pushing me? Todoroki asked mid-exchange, genuinely irritated. I am, Izuku said. Stepping inside a narrow spiral of cold and tapping 2 points on Todoroki's side. Not to hurt, not to show off, just to vent pressure where he'd had nowhere good to go. The effect was a sigh rather than a stagger. I'm pushing you to be you. That's sentimental, Todoroki said, and tried to ring the stadium with one gorgeous, terrible blast of ice. Izuku answered by pulling. Not him, pulling the frost's edge sideways. Aligning structure so the path didn't spear the student section. The audience gasped, then exhaled as the sheet shattered harmlessly along the empty boundary. You can use fire, Izuku said softly, stepping close enough that only Todoroki heard it. Not for your father. For airflow. Your ice is choking itself. You know that. You already solved it in your head. It's not a betrayal to use a solution you built. Todoroki stared at him like hallway walls had turned into puzzle boxes and he'd forgotten the key was in his pocket. His next breath lifted differently in his chest. He didn't look at Endeavor. He looked at the ground where his ice had cracked, at the way it had trapped his own ankles by accident, at the path he wanted to carve and couldn't without heat. He lit his left side. Not a fireworks show, not a rebellion for the cameras. A measured bloom that kissed the air and made the ice breathe. The stadium did the thing crowds do when they realize they're watching someone pick themselves, not a brand. It held a silence big enough to hear one boy exhale. Todoroki moved like he'd taken off ankle weights he hadn't realized he wore. Heat and cold braided sense into the room. Izuku parried a real attack finally. Not a half-suffocated burst, but a choice. He smiled, small, because this was a win no scoreboard could count for him. He lost the bout 30 seconds later. By inches, by calculation. Todoroki came at him with a clean sequence. Izuku turned the last strike into a redirect and let himself leave the ring the polite way. Instead of wasting energy proving a point, Aizawa's flag cut the air. Winner. Todoroki. The arena thundered with noise that had nothing to do with Izuku and everything to do with a kid who'd decided his body wasn't a court case. Izuku met Todoroki at the edge. They touched fists once, quick and honest. Thank you, Todoroki said, barely audible under the roar. You did that, Izuku said. Keep doing it. Endeavor stood stone-faced in the VIP row, trying to figure out how to claim ownership of a decision he hadn't made. He failed at it beautifully. Sagara watched him fail with a tiny PR. Ivet's satisfaction she didn't let leak into her posture. The finals lined up the way the country wanted. Bakugo versus Todoroki. It didn't end the way the country's lazier narratives expected. Bakugo Roa read himself into a migraine trying to earn a win Todoroki refused to hand him. Todoroki refused to play to anybody's script but his own and forgot to win because he was too busy refusing to lose the wrong way. It was a mess and a miracle and the kind of fight that made coaches write new drills. Bakugo took it at the end by ripping the air into pieces and stitching it back into a path with force. Then came the exhibition they called a final that wasn't on the schedule. The spontaneous, crowd closer, Midoriya vs. Bakugo, because the stadium wanted to see the thread pulled tight. Nezu shrugged. From the sidelines with a face that said chaos is a classroom. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose and signed the form he pretended didn't exist. Don't get sentimental, Aizawa said as they passed. If you bleed, bleed where medics can see you. Noted, Izuku said. Bakugo popped his neck. No fog, no space cheats, he said, eyes alight. We go clean. I'm not making you stupider, Izuku said. I'm matching you. They squared. Present Mike couldn't help himself. Bonus round. Begin. Aizawa cut in, cutting the theatrics in half. Bakugo came in like a thesis about momentum. Izuku me. Tee him with defense so efficient it looked offensive. Their feet mapped history across the scuffed floor. Neither of them had patience for cheap wins. This was the argument they'd been writing since EY were small. Two styles calling each other out without calling each other wrong. Halfway through, a camera rig on the north rail groaned. A bolt the size of a finger decided it was done with gravity's terms and backed itself out. The rig tipped, just a degree, enough that the operator went pale and the corner of the mount kissed air. In another 3 seconds, it would drop into the path of the next exchange like fate showing off. Bakugo didn't hear it. The crowd did and turned their heads a fraction, which is how people die in stadiums. Attention decides to multitask, physics declines the invitation. Izuku didn't make a speech to himself about heroism. He made a choice. Blink. Swap with the loose anchor he'd pinged during warm-ups. He caught the rig with a repulsion that didn't shove it skyward so much as remind it how to sit properly. The mount thumped back into place. The operator clutched the rail and mouthed something grateful and unprintable. Bakugo's blast clipped Izuku's shoulder in the half-breath he'd spent on the save. It knocked him backward across the chalked line of the ring. He landed on both feet like a gymnast who'd just decided to take up new sports. Aizawa's flag cut once. Out of bounds. Winner. Bakugo. The stadium went confused quiet for a beat, then rolled that quiet into a long noise that sounded like respect. Bakugo looked at the rig, looked at Izuku, and didn't grin. He scowled because scowling was an old habit. Then he jammed his palm toward the sky like the victory needed somewhere to be besides his chest. Don't steal my headlines, he muttered when they met at center. You nerd. File a complaint, Izuku said. I will, Bakugo said, and clapped him hard on the good shoulder. Medals came after speeches nobody would remember. All MI. GHT did the presentation with the easy grace of a guy who could charm metal. Bronze for Todoroki came with a look that said I saw you choose yourself. Gold for Bakugo came with a thumbs up he tried to pretend wasn't oxygen. Silver for Izuku came with a tiny lean in and a whisper All Might didn't need to hide. Good catch. Sagara shook Izuku's hand on the field instead of in a hallway. That's how you build public trust, she said. All steel under the praise. You made the safest choice, not the best clip. I don't care about trust as currency, he said. I care about people going home. Different language, same math, she said. Keep solving. Endeavor stalked away from the podium with a police escort he hadn't asked for and didn't argue with. He'd lost something today he couldn't ownership of a narrative, and the crowd had noticed. That was worth more than 6 headlines. Post-festival, the team spilled into the emptying stadium where quiet embarrassed itself by existing. Uraraka threw a towel over Izuku's head and tried to hide the way she was smiling. Momo sat cross-legged on the edge of the ring, knees dusty, tapping a list into her phone that was definitely titled Things to Build Before the Next Crisis. Todoroki stood under the north rail, hand on the mount he hadn't noticed almost killing a man. He stared at it the way you stare at a secret and decide not to keep it. You could have kept fighting, Bakugo said, dropping onto the mat like a boulder acquiring citizenship. I didn't need the favor. It wasn't a favor, Izuku said. It was a thing falling. Bakugo processed that with the intelligence people forget he has. He nodded once, sharp. Rematch. In a room with no cameras. And better bolts. Bring your own wrench, Izuku said. I always do, Bakugo said. Insulted he'd even have to say it. A shadow crossed the floor and didn't belong to anyone in the room. A ring, no, 3, skated across the ceiling as if the lights had decided to practice geometry. It was faint, no announcement. Barely there. Izuku didn't look up. He didn't need to. The ledger in the sky had ticked today. It hadn't slammed its stamp. It had watched a boy pick people ov. A win and filed the math under C. Worth. The awards ended. The crowd burst like a bubble. Night took the stadium back and asked it what it wanted to be tomorrow. UA exhaled a festival's worth of ambition and smoke. On the walk out, Sagara matched Izuku's pace for exactly 5 steps. We'll ask again about the advisory group, she said. Not because it helps us, though it does, but because why? Oh, you should learn how power behaves in rooms without cameras. I'll learn from you, he said, surprising her and himself. In rooms with doors I can leave through. She smiled in a way that said, good. We can build those. At the gate, Inko tried to get under the security rope like a determined flood. Izuku lifted it and she ducked like a spy. She looked at the metal, then at his shoulder, then at his face. You hungry? She asked. Always, he said. She handed him a rice ball that had no right to taste like victory, but did. Uraraka bumped his elbow. Study group tomorrow. Yeah, he said. I'll bring heist band-aids. I only accept morally ambiguous first aid, she said. Momo glanced up from her list. I have a proposal for a collapsible camera mount that won't. Do it, Izuku said. Send me the diagram. I'll pitch it to Nedzu before the commission tries to call it their idea. Good instincts, Momo said, approving. Todoroki approached, eyes on the ground, then on Izuku. Ramen, he said. Now, Izuku asked, surprised. Vegetables optional, Todoroki added, almost a joke. Izuku laughed. Deal. They walked beneath banners that had already started to sag, the way banners do when the noise goes home. Bakugo peeled off toward a gym because adrenaline thinks it still has bills to pay. Aizawa texted the class a photo of a stretcher with the caption "Don't make me push you, I'm busy." Nedzu sent a mouse emoji wearing a medal. The arbiter said nothing you could record. The night inside the city had edges again. They fit. He didn't feel taller. He didn't feel smaller. He felt placed. That was enough. Chapter 4 end. Chapter 5. The Blade That Refuses Lies. Hosu ran hot. Sirens bounced off glass. Somewhere close, a transformer died with a pop and the block hiccuped between light and dark. Izuku jogged beside Iida under a billboard that sold shoes like religion. He'd planned ramen and notes. He got smoke and running. I don't require escort, Iida said, breath tight, not looking at him. You don't, Izuku said, matching pace anyway. I'm not. I won't involve you. You already did, Izuku said. By walking faster. Iida didn't argue. His jaw did. They'd come to check on Tensai. A nurse had said he was stable. Stable wasn't the same as okay. Iida had stepped outside to get air that didn't smell like disinfectant and run instead. Izuku didn't ask why. The city was answering with flames and the rumor of a name. Stain. They turned down an alley because the street ahead had turned into a parade of flashing blue. Heat pressed their backs like a hand. Izuku's eyes stirred at the edges without permission. The cool sweep, the red clarity, the hum you could lean on. He kept them quiet. He needed fundamentals more than fireworks. The alley opened on a delivery yard where the ground had learned bad geometry. 3 pros lay crumpled. One breathed in a rhythm that said stay down. The other 2 were trying to be brave at the dirt. A man street oohed over them in gear that looked stolen from a myth. Bandana like a flag that didn't represent anything except resolve. Sword clean despite the chaos. Stain took everything in around him with a patience that felt like judgment, not optics. Iida stopped dead. His body forgot elegance and remembered family. Stay back, Izuku said, already moving forward because physics gets very picky around swords. Stain lifted his head. You're the one with the eyes. He sounded bored and curious in the same breath. Do you believe in anything that costs you? Izuku didn't answer in words. He slid in and met the first slash with a parry that wasn't a parry. 2 fingers on Stain's wrist redirected the arc into asphalt. He didn't try to disarm. He changed the path. The Sharingan mirrored angles while He Byakugan drew the field in a soft halo, the work lived in his feet. Iida lunged, reckless. Stain moved like a shrug. A flash of blade, a knuckle, a smear of wet. Iida stiffened, breath hitching, legs gone false beneath him. Stain's tongue touched blood on the edge of his blade like a ritual. Tenya, Izuku snapped, catching him under the elbow, weight-bearing without making it feel like pity. Don't, Iida spat, furious at gravity. He hurt my brother. I know, Izuku said, eyes never leaving the blade. We still do this right. Stain tilted his head, disappointed and almost pleased. Right, there is right. This city sells masks to children and calls them futures. He stepped in and cut for tendon, not flash. He fought like a craftsman. Izuku gave ground without surrender. He pulled a trash lid into Stain's path with a tug so small it read like coincidence. Metal rang. Sparks hopped and died. Stain's eyes narrowed a millimeter at the anti-telegraph. Little god, Stain said. You can move the room. Can you leave a man alone? Yes, Izuku said, and made that true by refusing the easiest move in his hand. He could sting Stain's mind and slow him for 3 seconds. He'd done it to Bakugo because rivalry likes tempo games. He wasn't doing it to a man whose will was his last intact bone. Iida tried to rise and fell hard enough to snap air. Midoriya, I will finish him. You will live, Izuku said. That's your job tonight. Stain came in low. Izuku's right hand traced a tiny circle and slipped inside the guard, his left tapped 2 non-damaging points along. Stain's forearm to make hand and blade argue. Stain countered with a knee that would have wrecked an untrained stance. Izuku adjusted and took the hit in muscle, not joint. He hissed, not dramatizing it. You're competent, Stain observed, annoyed with the compliment. So pick, save them. He flicked a glance at the pros, or stop me. False choice, Izuku said. The ground shook. Something large and winged roared overhead. The kind of cheap Nomu that came on sale when chaos needed noise. Shadows ran along the brick like spilled ink. The street 2 blocks over screamed. Izuku made a decision without elevating it. He shoved a micro-pull into the pallet stack to Stain's left, toppling it in a controlled fall that fenced the killer 1 step farther from the downed heroes. He didn't pin. He didn't trap. He inconvenienced. Stain flowed around the obstacle like water that hated your shoes. Iida clenched his teeth against paralysis and tried to move anyway. It looked like stubbornness. Izuku recognized prayer when he saw it. He stepped across Stain's line, not grand, just in the way. Why don't you kill me? Izuku asked, not because he wanted to die but because he needed the angle. He learned as he fought. He taught while he learned. Some men earn it, Stain said. Some don't deserve the legend it grants them. You want to be a filter, Izuku said, easy. I am a whetstone, Stain corrected, and cut. The blade whispered. Izuku heard the whisper and shifted enough that whisper became a haircut instead of a funeral. He didn't need bigger power to win exchanges. He needed better choices. He drew Stain's eyes with his shoulders and put his wrist where any normal parry would meet blade. At the last millisecond, he unparried and tapped Stain's sword flat with 2 fingers. Then stepped on the return path so it couldn't come back at a killing angle without tripping over reality. Who taught you? Stain asked, briefly interested. Everyone who tried to hit me, Izuku said. Sirens grew teeth. He'd licked the alley mouth and then rolled back like it was ashamed. Someone shouted for a medic, 2 streets away. Izuku watched Stain's attention flick to the noise and back. The man catalogued. He wasn't a berserker. He was an editor. Iida, Izuku said, not looking. Breathe. On my count. In, 2, 3. Out. 2, 3. Keep the rhythm. Don't let him write it for you. Iida found the counting and held it like a handrail. He didn't stop shaking. He built order under it. Stain darted, too fast to call out, and went for Iida's throat with the flat to knock him cold and finish the lesson later. Izuku pulled the air just enough to turn the strike into a graze. Stain noticed. Of course he noticed. You won't take my mind, Stain said, contempt and respect braided so tight they looked like one thing. Good, I won't, Izuku agreed, and touched Stain's shoulder with 2 fingers so lightly it looked like he'd missed. Stain's next step stuttered, or wanted to. His body refused to be told. He pushed through. Steel flashed. Izuku took a cut across the forearm because owning the root mattered more than keeping the shirt clean. He answered with a low sweep that wasn't meant to land, only to set a rhythm he could break. Stain bit. Izuku switched, torso level, hand to hilt in a no-blade bind. He pushed. Not with muscle, with the tiniest gravity flick. The sword's weight doubled for a breath. Stain adjusted like a man who'd trained in oceans. Babysitting, Stain said, disgusted, impressed. You have a god's tools and you're sweeping floors. I like clean exits, Izuku said. Gods pick who deserves them, Stain said. I'm not a god, Izuku said. I'm a guy with a mother who texts too much. Stain's mouth twitched. Then he lunged. Izuku saw it FIRST in the reflected glass behind him. The red thread of shoulder, the Byakugan's 360 telling him about a brick lip at his own heel, the long hum underneath that said you can bend the board but you pay interest. He stepped forward into the cut instead of back. That choice saved his ribs and cost him a slice along the side. Hot pain. He breathed around it. The world pinholed down for a second and then widened. I'm here, Uraraka said. Out of breath, turning the alley mouth into an exit with her presence alone. Tell me where. She'd followed his ping, not his orders. The city had given her woe kids to shepherd around a fallen lamp. Those kids were now in the arms of a pro who'd sworn at her affectionately and told her to go find her idiot friend. She did. Float the blade if he overcommits, don't tug, Izuku said. If you pull, he'll use the pull. Uraraka nodded, eyes sharp. She stepped into the rhythm like she'd heard the music from the street. She didn't try to break Stain. She made space. Iida, she said, voice sweet and iron, stay with us. Count for me. I am attempting, Iida said through his teeth. You're doing it, she said, as if it were already true. Stain registered her and adjusted the geometry. He liked one-on-one. He didn't get to. He became narrower, meaner, more elegant. Izuku met him there, stripping the fight down until it was hands and feet and breath. 2 blocks away, something collapsed. The sound found every alley at once. A woman screamed the way people scream when sound stops being abstract. Izuku's head bounced toward it. Stain's blade came hungry for the glance. Izuku didn't blink. He dove with his whole body, not to avoid the hit, but to reroute it, and Stain's sword paid rent in air instead of skin. He planted a palm to vault in. His vision snapped all the way open. Red, pale, because sometimes the board doesn't care how careful you are. Trinity hit him like a tuning fork. The alley slowed for exactly long enough to choose. He saw the falling sign 3 streets over, the woman beneath it frozen like a picture, the 2 kids staring, the angle, the bounce. He threw a lattice. 3 lines of intent that didn't exist 6 seconds ago, and the sign shivered. Then slid into the brick to its left like the wall had been waiting to hold it. The whole thing cost him the strength in his knees for a breath and the color in the edges of his day for the next hour. He staggered. Stain didn't miss it. The sword came for his neck. Uraraka floated the blade. Not high. An inch. Enough. Stain's balance corrected without thought. Izuku stepped inside and pinned his wrist against the wall with the heel of his hand, elbow tucked, hips low. He didn't break the arm. He drew a line across the fight and forced respect. Stain gave it, because he had to if he wanted to keep fighting. They hung in that knot for a second, breath hot, sword hand trapped, intent heavy in the air. Consent matters, Izuku said quietly, because he needed the words on record in this room. Even for enemies. Stain's eyes sharpened, something like approval buried deep in a field of contempt. Then earn your mercy, he said, and twisted in a way that would have torn his shoulder if he were built like other men. He wasn't. He slipped free with a piece of skin and pride left on the brick. He vanished up the wall like a shadow that had done gymnastics. Izuku launched after, body flagging but eyes clear. He felt Uraraka move with him like a held breath. Iida groaned and dragged one knee under him like a man lifting a car off himself with rumor and will. The alley turned into a stairwell of bad choices and they climbed it. The rooftop was the kind of quiet that has a body count. Wind pushed laundry lines. Hosu's fires drew lines on the horizon. Stain stood by a ledge, sword down. Body ready. He looked at the city like a disappointed father. Run, he said to Iida without looking. You are not ready either way. I am angry, Iida said, shaking. Upright now through effort and love. That is not the same thing. Most men don't know the difference, Stain said. They call their hunger justice, then starve the world. Then teach me something worth learning, Iida said. Fury trimmed to bone. Stain didn't laugh. He stepped. Iida braced and would have died if Izuku hadn't ruined the angle by being rude about physics, nudging the sword's tip a finger's width mid-thrust so it glanced instead of pierced. Iida got his forearm up in time to lose skin and keep an artery. He hissed and didn't apologize. You wanna have this argument? Izuku said to Stain, breath burning. Have it while not killing my friend. I have it while living my code, Stain said. Stop me. Okay. Izuku said. He did not bow. He did not posture. He moved. The next minute lived in hands and breath. Izuku took hits you can't dodge when you're buying time for a paralysis to fade. Uraraka used gravity-like punctuation, lightening a foot here, denying a leap there. Never trying to steal choice. Iida found a line that wasn't vengeance and stepped into it. He wasn't fast enough yet. He tried exactly right. Izuku waited for the opening that wasn't a trick. Stain gave him one because even killers have to inhale. Izuku slid and touched the flat of the blade, then the guard, then Stain's knuckles, in a path he'd learned from hours of watching masters argue with steel on grainy videos. He lifted not the weapon, but the idea of the weapon, an inch. Stain let him because refusing would have meant breaking a different rule and he had fewer of those than you'd think. Uraraka pinched air around the sword for exactly a heartbeat. Stain's wrist went light and wrong. Iida drove his leg like an engine, no flourish, all resolve, and stomped Stain's front foot into the roof, pinning him just long enough for Izuku to tangle the scarf at Stain's neck in a vent grate. Stain ripped free anyway, leaving cloth like a dead snake. He stepped back, sword down. He glared at Iida until the boy's fists unclenched by reflex. You didn't kill me when it was easy, Stain said to Izuku. You didn't kill me when it got hard. You didn't drug me with your mind and call it restraint. If you let me go, I'll come back worse. I know, Izuku said. Then put me down, Stain said, almost kind. No, Izuku said. I don't get to take your choices because I hate them. Sirens surged closer in a coherent wave that sounded like decisions. A pro on a neighboring roof shouted. A drone buzzed like an insect with a degree. Stain raised his chin. I will escape, he said, not bragging. Inventorying. Maybe, Izuku said. Maybe we catch you next time. Maybe you cut me. Maybe I stop you again. Maybe you stop yourself one day when nobody is watching and I never know. I can live with not getting credit. Stain's mouth did something complicated and then went still. You would be worth killing, he said, almost approving. You won't like why. I don't like a lot of true things, Izuku said. I keep them anyway. Three pros popped the rooftop door in a triangle of intent. Stain didn't run. He watched them arrive, then glanced at Izuku as if to stamp a memory. He put his sword on the ground. An insult and a courtesy, and let 3 bodies worth of weight make a choice for him. The pros cuffed him like men who'd trained for a lifetime to apply a simple math. He didn't struggle much. He looked past them at Iida. If you come for me again for the wrong reason, Stain said, conversational, I will finish the lesson. I will come as a hero, Iida said, raw, honest. Then bring gauze, Stain said, and somehow made it sound like benediction. He was gone after that, into the elevator of procedure. The wind remembered it had a job. The city remembered small noises. Uraraka let gravity back into her hands and shook them out like they'd been holding a heavy bag for too long. Iida sat down hard, elbows on knees. He breathed, on the count he'd been given. Until the world stopped looking like a courtroom inside his skull. He looked up finally, eyes wrecked and clear. Thank you, he said to Izuku. For protecting my life. For protecting my or not letting me become something I'd have to watch myself be. Thank Uraraka, Izuku said. She saved my neck twice. Uraraka shrugged and wiped sweat with the back of her wrist. Her eyes had glassy post-adrenaline shine. Everyone thinks is stoicism. We're a buy one get one deal, she said. What now? Hospital, Izuku said. He needs his brother's hand, not my opinion. They did that. The elevator was broken, so they took stairs and the view of a city still trying to remember how to breathe. The hospital smelled like when someone opens a new notebook, paper and hope and disinfectant. Tensai's room had one chair and too many machines. He smiled like a man who'd made a list of what to be grateful for and decided to start it tonight. 10 minutes into being exactly where he needed to be, Izuku's phone hummed. Unknown number. He let it go. The second buzz was a text. RS. Leaving stain breathing will be read as softness. Come outside when you can. He went, because ducking her eye. NA hallway was worse than talking in a doorway. Sagara stood under the hospital awning like weather that had chosen a suit. You could have ended a threat permanently, she said, not accusing, not friendly. I ended the threat tonight, he said. And tomorrow, she asked. The clip plays with or without you. I'm not a clip, he said. You are for the people who fund barricades and training dummies, she said, calm. They don't all hear nuance. They see Midori eyes, and killer walked. Then teach them better, he said. That's your job. She absorbed that with the expression of so. Me one discovering a bruise just by existing. They'll call it dereliction, she warned, not triumphant. They'll call you soft. They can spell wrong out loud, he said. I'm not rewriting my choices for a summary. Sagara looked at him the way a chess player looks at a move that shouldn't work and might in a year. You will need allies, she said. I have a class, he said. And a mother. And a stubborn girl who steals gravity. Good list, she said, almost smiling. Add one gray-suited bureaucrat who hates losing kids to optics. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. That counted as progress for both of them. She nodded like a gardener checking the weather and walked into the hospital to do paperwork he'd never see. He went up to the roof because air helps. Uraraka was already the with 2 vending machine coffees she'd bullied into dropping without eating her coins. You look like you got in a fight with a filing cabinet, she said. It won, he said. I filed under. Later. They sat on the ledge with their legs on the safe side like responsible delinquents. Hosu glowed in patches like a bad quilt. A helicopter thudded across the sky and kept going towards someone else's problem. I wanted to break him. Uraraka said to the horizon. In the head, I mean. Just make him stop. And I didn't. I hate that I wanted to. Wanting isn't doing, he said. But it tells you where the cliff is. I like railings, she said. Let's build those. He bumped her shoulder. She bumped back. A breeze came up and tried to make drama of their hair and failed. The universe poked him again. Small this time, polite. 3 faint rings skated across a blank slice of sky like someone had drawn chalk on the dark. The not voice didn't speak. Ledger, not gavel. A mark next to a name. You get weird when you're staring at nothing, Uraraka said. Practicing, he said. For what? Letting the night be night, he said, and she accepted the non-answer like a yes. They dumped the coffee when it cooled into sadness and went back down because rest is part of the job. Iida slept in the chair with his hand on Tensai's rail, posture identical to the way he ran, just smaller. Izuku texted Mom. Long day. Tell you in the morning. She replied. Bring home any boys who need soup. He laughed under his breath and pictured bringing an entire class into their kitchen like a parade. He cleaned his arm in the sink of a bathroom that had a sign asking people to treat it like they were guests in a friend's home. He tried not to bleed on the sign. Bandage on, shirt sleeve down, Hila. And on the mirror and let his heart stop drumming. His phone buzzed one more time. Nedzu. The commission will howl. I brought earplugs. Proud of you for choosing in motion. Sleep. Aizawa. If you're awake, you're wrong. Debrief at 8. He finally closed his eyes in a plastic chair whose entire personality was, my back hurts. He dreamed not about Stain but about the moment the falling sign slid into the wall instead of an artery. It had felt like writing a better sentence than the one the day offered. He woke to morning like someone had put the world through a washing machine and hung it out to dry. In the light, the rooftop looked normal. The alley looked like an alley. The city did breakfast at itself. Stain was a file in a drawer somewhere with a lock that wouldn't hold forever. Uku could live with that because he'd sent Iida home whole. Because he'd kept his own hands off a lever he didn't trust himself to pull. Because the ledger in the sky had ticked and moved on and he Old still look Inko in the eyes and accept toast without swallowing shame. On the way out, he passed the commission liaison trying to convince a nurse to let him into records with urgent public safety as a password. The nurse looked unimpressed enough to be a national treasure. Izuku nodded to her like a co-conspirator. She hid a smile behind a clipboard. Uraraka met him at the curb with 2 melon breads and a warning. "I'm gonna nap in class," she said. "Don't tell Aizawa. He knows everything," Izuku said. "He naps professionally," she countered. "True," he said, "but he'll make us write reports about it." "Fine," she said, very serious. "We'll nap responsibly." They walked into the day together. Not invincible, not immune, just people who'd made choices they could live with, which is its own kind of armor. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A city that stares back. Camino didn't burn so much as hiss. The smoke had engine oil in it, and glass kept sighing into the street like the city was shedding skin. Sirens braided. Drones hovered with blinky eyes. The crowd did that frightened math where everyone looks for a safe stranger to copy. "Head count first," Izuku said, jogging beside Uraraka and Kirishima as they cut down a side street. "Triages go by exits, not injuries. Move people who can walk so medics find the ones who can't." "You sound like Aizawa," Kirishima said, impressed and vaguely worried. "He naps more," Izuku said. They broke into the plaza and skidded to a halt. The skyline had a bite taken out of it. A building's ribs stuck out like it had decided to retire early. On the far side, a shockwave rolled a parked car onto its roof like a coin. All Might was somewhere behind that smoke. "Left lane," Izuku barked. "Don't cluster. Don't stare." He pointed with his chin. "Zero, tape a fence. Jiro, beat a rhythm so people move the same direction." He didn't open his vision all the way, he didn't need to. The Byakugan's halo found exits, the Sharingan wrote the crowd's intentions in red threads, the Rinnegan hummed like a deep joint you could lean on without bragging. He was 2 calls into turning panic into a line when the air ate the edges of his sight. Not darkness, static. A fuzz like cheap TV snow washed over his pupils from the inside. The red clarity didn't go black, it went wrong. The cool halo shivered and shrank. The hum stuttered like it had hit a pothole. "Midoriya," said a voice that had learned patience the hard way. Shigaraki walked out of smoke with the posture of someone who'd finally stopped itching. The hands on his coat were fewer, cleaner. A collar device sat at his throat like a joke you didn't laugh at. Around him, the air had that frosting of nothing that meant his null gaze field was live, a tech quirk hybrid T. Had turned his eyes into a static machine for other people's. Bakugo landed between them in 2 blasts and a grin. "There you are, fungus." "Language," Izuku said out of habit. Shigaraki's smile barely moved. "I brought a gift," he said, tapping the device. "For your pretty eyes." The fuzz thickened. Izuku's prediction lines smeared like someone had breathed on a window. If he pushed the genjutsu sting, it would slide. If he forced a pull, his depth went weird. "Okay," he said, quiet, mostly to himself. "Basics it is. Hold your lane," Bakugo said, bouncing on his heels. "I'll nuke the tech off his neck." "You'll nuke the neighborhood," Izuku said, already moving. "No collateral rules apply. Eat me," Bakugo said, and went left to keep an enemy busy while Izuku kept the city upright. Uraraka squeezed his arm once. "Quick, anchor pressure. Ask if you need me." "You'll hear me," he said, and meant it. Null gaze ate the ink from fine lines. Good. It couldn't erase physics. He dropped into old footwork. Nothing fancy, all honest. When a slab of facade peeled off the tower and began its slow promise to kill, he didn't reach for big. He made a moment small. "Clear the arc," he shouted, and people did. Because intention sticks when you sound like you mean it. He lifted his hand and pulled. Not the slab, not the city, he pulled the relationship between a dozen fist-sized shoe NKS that were about to break free on their own. The Rinnegan answered like a low tide. The pieces shook loose early, fell first, and took the energy out of the big sheet. It shattered on the way down, into a hail that Uraraka tapped weightless one by one and let drift like dumb balloons. Jiro whistled low. "Okay, that looked expensive. Cheaper than funerals," Izuku said, already turning. "Left. Gas main." Zero threw tape. Hiroshima put his arm through a window and came back with a cursing shopkeeper under one boulder shoulder. The man yelled, "My register," and then saw the free sky where H. is wall used to be and shut up mid-syllable. The crowd rippled wrong. Izuku pivoted. A slick black sphere rolled out of a crate and ticked. Some idiot had installed a homebrew-shaped charge in a city where kids lived. On it, Izuku said, and felt Uraraka's breath catch across the plaza. He didn't blink. He blink-swapped. He didn't swap with a person. He swapped it with a manhole cover heat ALR. Edie loosened with a thought on his way in. No drama, all prep. The bomb popped into the air at his height. He repulsed gently, pedaled the force like he was trying to peel a fruit without tearing the meat, and sent the blast up, up, up. Where it made a pop and a white flower nobody got hurt by. Gasps broke into cheers and curses, because people are complicated even when alive. "Stop making me like you," shouted a woman in a delivery uniform, crying and laughing as she ran. "Can't hear you," Izuku yelled back, and meant it literally. A ringing had started at the edge of his ears that meant the day was turning up its volume. Shigaraki didn't chase a lost opening. He studied it the way a kid studies an ant under glass. "Pretty," he said. "You help. That's your kink." Bakugo blew a crater between them to make a point. "Fight me. No eyes." Shigaraki lifted an empty hand. The space around Bakugo's face fuzzed like someone had filmed him through frosted glass. Bakugo's next micro-feint is read the distance and he had to catch himself with a palm on the ground. Null gaze was cheating. "Don't force prediction," Izuku called. "Trust your feet. Eat me politely," Bakugo snarled, but he reset his stance the way pros do when nobody's looking, and his next step was not a feint at all, just clean. Commission vans nose dived into the plaza with all the grace of a bureaucratic stamp. Doors thumped. Aegis agents in gray poured out, helms reflecting pretty fires. "Midoriya Izuku," a voice on a bullhorn declared, wearing authority like glitter. "By emergency order, later," Izuku shouted without turning. "People first." Quote, "You were to submit to protective custody for public safety." Uraraka groaned softly next to him. "They brought forms to a fire." "Classic," he said, and tried to step past a bleeding teenager to get to Izuku's shoulder. Izuku caught the man's forearm, redirected him toward a medic with the kind of grip that says "I'm not asking," and looked the agent in the visor. "Do triage," Izuku said, "or get out of my way." Director Sagara instructed. "Not now," Izuku said, then softer because he wasn't a jerk, "Please. People are heavy." The agent faltered, then turned on a heel like his training couldn't tell the difference between orders and decency. He started hauling a barricade like it was religion. 2 more gray suits followed, torn between protocols and a boy with green eyes who didn't have time to be polite about anything but priorities. Sagara herself wasn't in the first wave. She rolled in later without sirens, face pinched at the corners in a way that said someone had put stupid in her day without asking. All for One announced himself with absence. It felt like the air across 3 blocks took a breath and forgot to give it back. The building's shadow lengthened without sunlight moving. In the dirty fog of broken lives, an outline big as a billboard folded into existence and smiled with nothing. All might hit him before the crowd could decide whether to be brave. Sound jumped the curb and hit bodies. The shock hammered Izuku's teeth. Chunks of billboard ripped free like bored meteorites. "Umbrella," Izuku yelled, "palm up." The micro pull was a delicate, terrible trick. He'd practiced on bags of rice and stacks of plates and once on 3 dozen paper cranes Momo made as a joke. He drew a narrow cone at arm's length and let momentum contribute. The falling sheet of sign metal tore itself into strips like he'd whispered the idea of it, and those strips arced into the crater, knitting a quick cover above a family crouched behind a bench. Uraraka tapped the last strip light so it wouldn't brain the dad. The dad stared at her like he'd just discovered the word gratitude had weight. "Move," she said, pointing with her eyebrows. He did. All Might and All for One broke a street and a memory at the same time. Drones fled for better angles. Jiro's heartbeat kicked triple time. She grit her teeth until it remembered rules. Bakugo barked a laugh with too much edge and went right back to work bullying a villain away from a medic cot. Shigaraki tracked Izuku through debris like a hawk that had decided to finish school. He walked into the Aegis perimeter without blinking. 2 agents tried to stop him and got their weapons oxidized into art for their trouble. You keep choosing, Shigaraki said, cheerful. Like a sociopath who'd just found a new hobby. It won't matter. It matters right now, Izuku said, and meant it. A girl with a bike helmet too big for her head slid behind his legs like he was furniture you trusted not to fall over. He tapped her shoulder and pointed. Stick to the tape fence. Look for yellow hat guy. That's a medic. Go. She went because confidence is contagious. Null gaze crawled closer. The static chewed at his periphery. He could still see. He just couldn't cheat. Good. He'd cheat later when it didn't cost the room so much. Shigaraki flicked his fingers and a section of rail went gray and crumbled, clearing a path through the barrier like a middle manager misplacing a policy. Aegis lurched left, disciplined, doomed. Sagara arrived at the same second and saw the stupid about to happen. Hold perimeter, she snapped, voice steel. Hands off the Midoriya kid until the civilians are clear. A lieutenant twitched. Ma'am, the order. That's the order, she said. Eyes open. They listened because her tone had 0 adjectives in it. A tremor ran through the plaza. A support column sighed, and then concrete started limping down. Izuku felt the change a half heartbeat before it showed. He sprinted and slid under the leaning chunk of balcony where 3 teenagers had decided to survive by being indecisive. The slab shed pebbles like dandruff. Don't move, he told them, kneeling fast. Not even to be helpful. Should we? One boy started, immediately helpful. Shish, Izuku said gently, and lifted his hand like he was tuning a radio. He shaped a pull the size of a hat above their heads and fed it clockwise until hairline cracks turned toward it. The balcony listened to the better idea, sloughed off its anger in fistfuls of gravel, and then let go in a controlled surrender that landed at his hip instead of on their faces. Hiroshima shouldered in and body blocked the last twitch of debris. Manly, he gasped, face dust white and grinning. Responsible, Izuku said. Lame word, Hiroshima said fondly, herding the kids out. The fight on the far side went mythic. All Might drove All for One through a fake wall that learned what failure meant. All for One answered with a quake that tried to become the new street plan. The city lay down and hoped for the best. Izuku felt his hand scream at him to try for Trinity, just once, just to hold the architecture together in one perfect picture. He didn't. Not with null gaze popping static inside his skull. Not with half the plaza still on 2 feet only because gravity hadn't remembered their names yet. Uraraka hopped a fallen light pole and landed beside him, flushed and happy to be upright. You're doing too much, she said without preamble. Ask. Use me. I need. Izuku started, then actually said it. I need a clean lane to the northwest stretch. There's a stairwell choke. I can't open it and hold the pole, and if I let go, it falls stupid. Copy, she said, and disappear. D with the same efficiency as a checkmark. Shigaraki watched her go. You collect friends like cats, he said to Izuku. One day you'll trip on the herd. Or they'll catch me, Izuku said. That's sentiment, Shigaraki said. Contempt gentle. That's math, Izuku said, and forced a block of concrete to remember how to be 40 smaller blocks. He let them drop in a pattern that made a stare for panicking feet. He didn't look heroic. He looked busy. He liked that better. All Might roared. Carolina, and the sound cut out because All for One ate it with a quirk like a vacuum cleaner. All Mig. HT grinned wider and stole the noise back with his fist. The two of them rewrote a paragraph of Skyline. A man in a bathrobe across the street recorded it while crying. Aegis shifted again, caught between guarding, grabbing, and not getting decayed. Sagara moved like a bishop on a cluttered board, redirecting with the tap of a file, a look, a quiet, no. She found Izuku's shoulder in the mess without touching him. When the civilians are gone, she said, not sugar-coating the later. We'll have the fight about custody. Great, he said, and didn't stop doing his job. Null gaze pulsed. The static flared hard enough that his vision washed white for a breath. When it cleared, Shigaraki was close, not hungry, just testing. His hand hovered near Izuku's chest in a way that said I can take you apart like a house if I want to. Izuku stepped in so the hand would have to touch his cheek to decay him, and stared at Shigaraki's collar. You need that to feel brave. Shigaraki's laugh came from somewhere quiet. I need nothing, he said. But I enjoy you more when you can't cheat. Then watch me, Izuku said, and didn't even try to open his eyes. He dropped to the oldest stance he owned. Eden threw a palm heel that wasn't elegant, wasn't heroic, but was rude to balance. Shigaraki slid. Bakugo's explosion met him like a volunteer with a clipboard. Shigaraki went through a bus stop and came up insulting gravity again. Don't die, Bakugo panted without looking. I still want to beat you up somewhere private. File a complaint, Izuku said, and had just enough breath to grin. LL might hit the ground near them hard enough to make a new crater. All for One followed, casual as a landlord. All Might's smile slipped at the corners, the way people smile when they've found their limit and made friends with it. He rolled his shoulder like a guy who was used to bad news and still tipped service workers. Kids, he said, voice bigger than the city and also just a man's. Keep your lanes moving. Already moving, Izuku said. We like lanes. All for One's helm turned toward the sound. The little inconvenience, he said, amused. The one with the eyes. Izuku could feel He arbiter's attention tilt from sky distance, ledger out, case still open. He didn't look up. He didn't ask for anything. All for One gestured lazily toward the plaza. A lattice of unseen force tree. To suck the breath out of 100 chests. Uraraka stumbled, swore, and grabbed a railing. Bakugo swore and got louder. Izuku did the only thing he could do without getting cute. He fed a counter-pull not at All for One. Not at the crowd, but at the pressure itself, like he was readying a loose knot. The air coughed and gave the lungs back. Annoying, All for One said, still amused. He lifted 2 fingers. All Might didn't let the second trick happen. He stepped through All for One's posture and punched an answer into the man's ribs. The shockwave wrote a temporary law, stand back. Everyone obeyed. In the breathing space, Sagara spoke into a mic she hadn't held up until now. All units. Protect evac routes. Leave the brawl to the brawler. She flicked the mic off and muttered to Izuku. Try not to make me your enemy in front of cameras. You're doing that yourself, he said, not cruel, just honest. Her mouth twitched like a woman filing 2 truths in the same folder. The fight found its last page. All Might wound himself into something that looked like pain-wearing purpose and slammed that purpose into a man who had never once considered equipment failure a possibility. The plaza roared. The drones forgot to be cool. All for One didn't crumple because pride hates drama, he folded because physics finally insisted. All Might straightened, not taller, just steadier, Brea. Thing like a man who had agreed to something expensive. He raised one arm and pointed. Not at a villain, at a camera, at a country. You're next, he said. He didn't mean pressure. He meant responsibility. Izuku caught the look under the line. The one that didn't say be me but said be yours, loudly. The crowd heard halves and filled them with hope and fear and hashtags. Izuku heard the whole thing and said okay without speaking. Aegis fanned to take custody of the survivors and the stupid. Sagara didn't try to handcuff him in the afterglow. She knew better. She stood at his shoulder and fed down the public story with hands that knew how to braid ugly into useful. On the edge of it, Uraraka found him and touched his wrist in that quick check-in way. You okay? No, he said, honest. But I'm good. Ask for help, she said, not asking. I need you to walk 2 blocks with a family who lost a staircase, he said. I need you to make jokes so their kid eats a protein bar and thinks it's special. I need you to tell me when I'm doing too much. Copy, she said, voice soft like a blanket not like pity. You're doing too much. He laughed, tired, grateful. Thanks. They moved through the mess together. They settled arguments between angry strangers and angrier insurance apps. They redirected gray suits from optics to sandbags with embarrassing efficiency. Bakugo sat on a broken curb and refused a medic 3 times before accepting a bandage like an apology. Hiroshima complimented a pro's form until the pro blushed through a soot mask. Above the plaza, the sky drew 3 pale rings you wouldn't see unless you'd learn to look sideways. The ledger noted, it didn't stamp. Not today. By the time the last ambulance cut out, Camino smelled like wet concrete and cold noodles. The crowd went home with more stories than any of them wanted. A camera rig swung past. Sagara took a live hit on a local feed and said, "We'll ensure public safety by coordinating with UA. And placing guardrails where greatness needs them." She didn't look at Izuku when she said guardrails. She looked at the city like she respected it. He caught her after. "You tried to grab me in the middle," he said, low. "I tried to keep you alive long enough to yell at you," she said, equally low, equally true. "You're allowed to hate my methods. You don't get to pretend I'm not carrying the same fear you are. Difference is, I have forms. Bring better ones," he said. "I'm writing them," she said. "Bring notes. Tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow," she agreed, surprising both of them. All Might sat on the edge of an ambulance bumper, shoulders smaller, smile still the same. He gave Izuku a little lift of the chin. Not a summons. An acknowledgement. Izuku lifted his hand back. Not a salute. A promise. On the walk to the line of student shuttles, Uraraka bumped him with a hip. "You're allowed to ask for help," she said again, because repetition turns a warning into a habit. "I did," he said. "Ask more," she said. "Lunch tomorrow," he said. "Your pick. I'll carry trays." "Hero work," she said, satisfied. He passed a gray suit holding a stack of unused zip ties and a face full of confused faith. Izuku touched his arm, gentle. "Thanks for hauling barricades." The man blinked. "I thought you hated us." "I don't," Izuku said. "I hate bad timing." The man laughed once, too loud, and went to help someone who wasn't on TV. On the bus, Aizawa texted the class a single line: "If you're awake, you're wrong." Debrief at 8. Nedzu sent a mouse emoji wearing a tiny hard hat. Bakugo fell asleep with his forehead against the window and woke up pretending he hadn't. Hiroshima gave a thumbs up to no one. Jiro leaned her head back and hummed a note that relaxed necks. Zuko stared out at a city that had watched him back all day. He didn't feel larger or smaller. He felt like a person who had done the job in front of him while bigger jobs snapped at his heels. He could live with that. He'd train with that. He'd argue with it next time in a better stance. In the reflection, the ring smeared into the bus lights and disappeared. He let them. He had lanes to plan a ND, a study group to not cancel, and a mother to text. He typed, "Home late. Soup tomorrow." Inko replied with a photo of vegetables and a caption, "Always." He closed his eyes for exactly 3 stops and didn't dream. Chapter 6 end. Chapter 7. Guardrails you can leave. Reporters threw questions like rice. The words stuck to the glass of the commission's headquarters and slid down uselessly. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed in a way that made everyone feel like homework. Sagara stood at the far end of the conference room with the posture of a person who put out fires by naming them. Nedzu sat on a chair that was definitely too big for him and somehow made it look like a throne he'd borrowed. Aizawa leaned against the wall as if gravity owed him rent. Bakugo had been made to wait outside or tone reasons, and was currently muttering tone reasons into a vending machine. Izuku watched the door long enough to count the hinges and the seconds until it clicked shut. Uraraka slid into the seat beside him, angled so they could share a table and a plan. The screen lit with a logo, Aegis, Null Gaze Protocol. The slide should have come with thunder. It arrived with a whine and a bullet list. Emergency order draft, Sagara said. City-wide deployment of nullifying fields during catastrophic events. Dampeners for civilians who interfere. Dampeners for you. Aizawa's mouth made a line. "You can't dampen a kid and call it safety. We can if the kid edits space," said a man with a tie that looked expensive and a spine that looked rented. "Public confidence is our mandate. Public breathing is mine," Aizawa said. Nedzu's eyes smiled. "I love when adults remember their mandates." Sagara let the room spend itself on positions, then looked at Izuku. "We're not here to collar you. We're here to draft guardrails." "Guardrails I can leave," he said. "Yes," she said, meaning it so clearly that even the tie stopped blinking. He didn't answer with a speech. He put his hands flat and let the room's hum sort itself into a map. Outside, a helicopter thudded past. Somewhere on another floor, a printer choked on a staple. In the hallway, Bakugo smacked the vending machine until it apologized with a can. "Deploy your fields at the perimeter," Izuku said. "Never over evac routes. If you have to null the guy melting a bridge, fine. Don't null the girl catching her little bee. Rother with a quirk that makes her the only ladder that fits. Policy likes verbs, Sagara said. Make that a sentence. Null at targets, not at crowds, Izuku said. Quirks are seat belts in this city. Don't cut them because you hate the color. Nedzu clapped once. Quiet. Print that. The tie started to argue again when the lights flickered. Not the usual flicker. The kind of glitch where the room forgets it's real. 3 pale rings drew themselves on the far wall without using a pen. Every fluorescent tube sighed and went meek. Uraraka's fingers found Izuku's sleeve. Not fear. Contact. You seeing it? Yeah, he said, already standing. The rings unfolded into an attention that had weight but not mass. The glass on the far side of the room showed the city, and behind the city, a copy in chalk that only moved when you made it. The pale arbiter stood where the reflection wasn't. The last time, it had put a toe in his kitchen. Today, it had a room reservation. Everybody felt it. Sagara's aides dropped their tablets without meaning to. Aizawa, who didn't startle for hurricanes, shifted like knives had grown rules. Nedzu looked delighted, which probably meant he was terrified and chose a different face. Midoriya Izuku, the not voice said, the room receiving the idea the way lungs receive air. The ledger is open. Bakugo exploded the conference doors like a solution to a social situation. If a geometry ghost invited itself to the meeting, I get to be here. You're not on the agenda, Sagara said automatically. Neither is the moon chandelier, he shot back, stabbing a thumb at the rings. The arbiter didn't look at anyone. It looked at choice. Its attention slid over the Aegis seal, over Sagara's badge, over Nedzu's tiny paws, and settled on Izuku the way. Gravity settles when you stop lying about where you stand. You refrain, the not voice said, counting. You move pieces without stealing players. You keep the board fairer than it arrives. Your account rises. Do you do refunds? Izuku said, because sarcasm is a raft. The rings pulsed, amused or offended. A point of order. Those who move without permission must be accounted for. Define permission, he said. Consent, it said. Witness. Cost. Sagara stepped forward like a lawyer who found a case that could fix a city. Then witness this, she said, chin up. He saved a stadium by choosing humiliation over a headline. He keeps choosing the thing that makes my job easier and my life harder. We're asking for guardrails, not a collar, because we can see the difference. The arbiter turned attention toward her like a beam that found a clean floor. A line appeared next to her name in a ledger no one else could see. The not voice didn't speak to her. It filed her. Outside, sirens found a key and switched songs. People shouted 2 blocks away in a way that meant the day had thrown a brick at glass. A ceiling speaker popped and went to static. Aegis radios screamed and then went blank. Power's out, an aide said. Uselessly. Backup grids, Sagara snapped. Lock lifts. Keep stairs open. Nedzu patted the armrest like it was a pet. I do so love a field exercise. Uraraka was already moving. She grabbed a go bag that had been stationed under the table because she'd put it there before the meeting started. She tossed Aizawa a spare scarf. She tossed Izuku a roll of athletic tape. She kept the med kit. Lobby, Izuku said. Choke points on floors 6 and 10. Generators on 3. We move. Everyone without a punch moves, Aizawa said, already moving, tape looping his fingers clean. They got the door open on human muscle because electricity had decided to take a nap. Stairwell air hit them like a mean dog. On floor 9, a guard had propped a door open with a fire extinguisher and stayed to keep it from slamming on panicking legs. People poured around him with that sick river motion crowds get when they can't agree on kindness. Izuku touched the rail and listened. The Byakugan sulked under static. The Sharingan smeared like watercolor. The Rinnegan hummed with a stutter every time the rings flashed. Null Gaze Field, he realized, not Shigaraki's, Aegis's, was live in the building. Test mode jumping the rails when the arbiter showed. Perfect. Irony ordered a drink and didn't tip. He stopped trying to see with magic and used the thing that worked when tech failed, voice and presence. 1 lane down, 1 lane up. He called. Hands off shoulders unless the person in front asks for it. If you can walk, you can carry. People listened because Song E1 had asked them to do something specific. Aizawa took the turn landing and became a traffic cone with authority. Uraraka floated a toddler over a knot of briefcases into her mother's arms and didn't make it look like a miracle. Sagara did crowd control with one hand and texted with the other, her phone connected to a network Nedzu had invented for fun. Bakugo ran above the flow along the rail like a bat out of bureaucracy. Looking for places to explode the right thing. 2 doors stuck on 7. He yelled down. Whoever designed this place hates people. Government building, Nedzu-san. G from somewhere he shouldn't have been able to reach that fast. On 6, a paneled office door had warped under heat and was holding 3 terrified interns hostage. Izuku slapped tape around his palm, planted, and pushed, not with a show. With a knuckle's worth of pull in the hinge line, the door decided to unclench. The interns fell into Aizawa's scarf like it was home. He swore once, quietly, ND tipped them down the stairs with dignity. Uraraka vanished and came back with an armful of bottled water that had been hoarding itself in a conference pantry. She shoved a bottle into Sagara's hands mid-directive. Hydrate or I unionize, she said. Already unionized, Sagara muttered, drinking. They hit the lobby and found the problem. Glass had spidered into a mosaic. The revolving doors had bulldozed themselves to a stop with people inside. The security scanners were dead and sulking. Outside the windows, the street had turned into an argument about who owned it. Aegis officers in gray tried to form a line. Protesters and rubberneckers pressed on the tape. Villains. None visible, not yet. A portable null gaze mast hummed in the middle of the plaza, static blooming out like cold fog. Its screen said ready in polite letters. The arbiter's ring slid across the lobby ceiling without touching it. The knot voice filled the room again. A thought you didn't ask for. Account now, it said. Decision consequence. Show. Show what? The tie snapped, near hysteric. That we can turn off a god. Nedzu wiggled his paws. Do be a dear and don't try that. A sound threaded the crow. And made everyone look up even if they didn't know why. Shigaraki walked out of a delivery truck that did not belong to him like a man carrying a small bonfire in his pocket. He wore a collar again, different make, uglier idea, and his smile wasn't wide so much as precise. You built a device to make his head fuzzy, he said, nodding at Izuku. Cute. I brought scissors. He flicked his fingers at the null mast. Rust bloomed across the struts, pretty as art, ugly as intent. An Aegis agent lunged and got his glove oxidized into confetti for his trouble. Bakugo was airborne before anyone started swearing. Aizawa erased Shigaraki's quirk with a glare that could sterilize a wound. Shigaraki's fingers curled back, human again. He grinned at the feeling like a connoisseur sampling a vintage he planned to destroy. Round 2, he asked. Take a number, Bakugo said, and blew a crater across the plaza. Shigaraki didn't stand where the crater landed. He stood where Bakugo would want to stand next. He moved to step through Bakugo's rhythm, and found a 2-finger redirect standing in his way. Izuku slid into the slot like a comma saving a sentence from bad grammar. He didn't reach for big power. He gave Shigaraki's wrist rude, simple respect. Shigaraki tried to decay the space and got Aizawa's stare for dessert. The collar at Shigaraki's throat purred and spat static. Null fields across the plaza hiccuped. The arbiter's rings pulsed, amused that humans were still trying to write laws to bind weather. Aegis. Sagara snapped, voice turned steel. Perimeter only. The mast is compromised. Do not engage the boy with the 2 brain cells unless you are wearing my patience. Ma'am, a lieutenant asked, lost. Hold the lines, she said. Make lanes. That is your job. They did. It wasn't pretty. It was the right size. Shigaraki took it all in, inventorying. He blinked at the rings. What are you? He asked, genuinely curious, like a child asking a knife to tell the truth. The arbiter looked at him and wrote a line in a ledger that felt like frost on Izuku's teeth. The knot voice did not answer Shigaraki. It spoke to Izuku again. You moved the path of falling things, it said. You left enemies whole when breaking them would be cheaper. What is your floor? My mother can look me in the face, he said. Trite, it said. True, he said. The null mast shrieked. Shigaraki had gotten hands on it for exactly half a second. A smear of gray, a spark, and the field flared, uncontrolled, doubling back. The static poured into Izuku's eyes so hard his knees remembered gravity intimately. His vision ran like a watercolor in a storm. Uraraka's hand hit his back. He stayed upright because someone asked him to. He could not see 3 rings. He could not read red lines. The world was a hallway with the lights out. Good. Use what's left. Left door hinge, he said, pointing. 3 hits. Gentle. Kirishima. On it. Uraraka. Light those benches, but only when the push starts. Copy. Aizawa. I know, Aizawa said, erasing where a race mattered and not bragging about it. Bakugo. I'm busy. Bakugo snapped, which meant he was exactly where he needed to be. Sagara moved in the negative space between panics, pushing people with her eyes. Nedzu vanished and reappeared on top of the help desk like a gremlin who'd scraped into politics. He raised a tiny bullhorn. 1 lane left, 1 lane right, 1 lane out. Keep your feet. Keep your neighbor. Pretend manners are a quirk. They listened. People always say crowds are dumb. Crowds are classrooms. If you give them a lesson that makes sense and a teacher who doesn't condescend, they graduate fast. Shigaraki tried to slide around the work and found himself caught in something he couldn't touch. A city being held together by basic kindness. It made him furious. He reached for a pillar. Aizawa erased. Bakugo barked a laugh. You're going to have to use your hands like the rest of us, fungus. Shigaraki flicked a glance at Izuku, eyes bright with the kind of interest you don't want a villain to feel. You'll run out of good choices, he promised. Then we'll see what you keep. Probably my friends, Izuku said. They're heavy. They hold doors. Uraraka's palm smacked his shoulder. Stop being cute, she said. You're bleeding. He looked down. Blood had decided to make an argument across his wrist. He taped it because Uraraka was busy and because dignity is sometimes gauze. Null gaze kept hissing. The arbiter kept making rings on the ceiling like a judge drawing circles until the defendant made sense. The mast finally coughed, whined, and died. Sagara pointed 2 agents at it with the kind of authority that says I will personally report you if you turn it back on. Midoriya, the not voice said. Quieter now that the static wasn't screaming. A ledger is not a god. A ledger is a list. Do you want yours to end long or loud? I want mine to end with other people's names still on theirs, he said. That did something. The rings wavered, small, like a stifled laugh or a swallowed sob. The ledger line moved next to his name. Not a stamp, a scribble, not absolution, a checkmark penciled in lightly. Shigaraki saw none of that. He saw an opening he didn't have and lunged for it anyway. Bakugo met him with a blast that wasn't a kill shot, it was rude and precise. And knocked Shigaraki through a hedge like a cat deciding to leave a conversation. Aegis moved to bite. Sagara lifted a hand. No, later, she said. Keep the lanes. They did. Shigaraki retreated with a scowl that promised pop quizzes. He left the collar on the ground like an idea he'd tried and broken. Bakugo stepped on it for punctuation and then pretended he hadn't. The lobby breathed. The line to the street loosened and didn't break. The doors opened on their rails like they'd come to their senses. The city took itself back. In the sudden quiet, the arbiter's rings slid down the far W. All and pooled into nothing like cream sinking into coffee. It left a sentence behind without words. Account continued. It didn't feel like mercy. It felt like work. Nedzu hopped off the desk and Str. Aidened the little bow on his uniform for no reason except joy. Splendid, he said. Aizawa rubbed the bridge of his nose like existence had given him homework. Debrief at 8. Stop scheduling, Bakugo growled. Hands still crackling with victory. Rematch at 6. Breakfast at 7, Uraraka said, tossing Izuku a look that meant you're eating. Sagara's aides tried to reassert control by holding clipboards harder. Sagara ignored them and came to stand in the human wreckage with her hands empty. You refused a collar, she said to Izuku. You accepted responsibility. Your PR. Ice is always going to be attention you don't want. I'll take attention if it buys exits, he said. Good, she said. She looked, just for a second, like a person who wanted to be better than her job allowed. Come write policies with me. Real ones. Doors you can leave. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she agreed, and this time it wasn't a negotiation. They drifted out into a city that smelled like stress and fried food. The crowd had already changed shape into people on phones telling family stories that started with, "You wouldn't believe." A kid tugged his mother's sleeve and pointed at Uraraka. "She made the bench float," he said. "Reverent." Uraraka winked like a magician who didn't need a hat. Todoroki found them 2 blocks away by the noodle shop, hair damp, shirt clean, expression complicated. "I got your text," he told Izuku, which was funny because Izuku hadn't sent one. "Ramen," Todoroki added, deadpan. "Vegetables optional," Izuku said. Todoroki considered it. "I'll try the egg, it's a breakthrough," Uraraka whispered, delighted. They ate at a counter with bowls that were older than some laws. Bakugo pretended he didn't like his broth and then slurped until the cook said, "Kid, breathe." Hiroshima declared the texture manly, and got teased for it by a grandmother who could probably deadlift him. Jiro hummed a little victory song under her breath, just Ood enough to tune nervous systems back down. Izuku waited for the adrenaline to crawl out of his spine and move on. It did, slowly. The cut on his wrist stung in a way that meant living. He answered texts with thumbs that finally remembered how to be fingers. Inko asking if he needed soup, yes. Aizawa reminding him to write down what worked, yes. Nedzu sending a mouse emoji carrying a tiny file folder, sure. Sagara forwarding a draft with null at targets, not at crowds underlined 3 times. He sent Sagara a note back. Add lines and lanes. People are good at staying in them if you set them up. She replied with a dot. Then another. Then, add guardrails you can leave. The dot blinked. We'll practice. Uraraka bumped his shoulder. You spaced out. Practicing, he said. For what? Letting the day be done, he said. She slid a napkin toward him. It had a doodle of 3 circles, then a heart. I made art, she announced. Perfect, he said. Bakugo hooked a thumb toward a gym window across the street where a sign read "Open late" in a font that meant "I will hurt you kindly." 2 hours. No cameras. I'm gonna file a complaint with my fists. Bring better bolts, Izuku said. I always do, Bakugo said. Offended he needed to say it. Todoroki stared at his egg like it had delivered a sermon and then looked up. I'm proud of you, he told Izuku, like a man trying a new muscle. For refusing to be what people want you to be. Likewise, Izuku said, for choosing. They paid. Uraraka argued with the register until it accepted a discount it had not intended to offer. The cook laughed and gave them extra scallions. Outside, the air had finally remembered how to be a separate thing from noise. On the walk back, a gray suit with a stack of unused zip ties jogged up, face pink. Hey, he said to Izuku. Thanks for the barricades. I mean, thank you for not making us your enemy. Thanks for hauling, Izuku said. Keep doing that. The man nodded, confused and relieved in equal parts. He ran the other way to help someone who wasn't on TV. The apartment stairs smelled like laundry soap and pride. Inko had left the door unlatched in a way that meant I will wait up for you even if I fall asleep. He slid it open and found a pot warming a stove and a note on the counter that said, soup is not an emergency. Soup is a choice. A cartoon spoon flexed in the corner. He laughed into the quiet. He texted. Home. Soup later. Don't worry. Hydrate. She replied with 17 hearts and a photo of a spoon wearing sunglasses. He showered the day off. He taped risked again because Uraraka would check and he wanted to get a good job, responsible citizen. I roll out of her in the morning. He lay on his bed and stared at the ceiling without asking for anything. The rings came back once. Faint as chalk dust. They traced each other, then overlapped, then went still. You continue, the not voice said. Not praise, not threat. A line with a blank after it, waiting for a verb. Good, he said. I like verbs. He let his eyes close. He didn't dream about ledgers or collars or fields. He dreamed about lanes and hands on rails and a city that had not love. Ed him but had decided not to kill him today. He took that. He would always take that. In the morning, he'd show up to debrief, and breakfast, and a rematch, and a meeting with a bureaucrat writing better forms. He'd bring band-aids and a marker. He'd circle bottlenecks. He'd write null at targets, not at crowds so many times it became a path. He'd knock once on a rooftop rail and squeeze a Rarik. A's hand when she snarked at him for forgetting to drink water. He'd tell Bakugo he was a nerd. He'd tell Todoroki the egg mattered. He'd text his mother that soup could be a strategy. He'd keep doing the simplest thing he knew how to do in a world that wanted spectacle. He'd make lanes. Chapter 7 End.